goodness, that takes me back to my days at medical school where we used to run back and watch Neighbours at lunchtime. It's also International Spouse Day today, a day dedicated to recognising spouses everywhere and acknowledging the commitment made to each other.
This is my boss, Jonathan Hart. This is Mrs. H. When they met, it was murder.
Oh, I love Heart to Heart. Absolutely brilliant. Also, it's Dental Drill Appreciation Day today, a day that celebrates the invention of the electric dental drill by American dentist George Green. Yes, in 1875. And apparently the advances this tool has represented for dentists across the globe. So it's Dental Drill Appreciation Day today. Lovely. Right, let's start today's show, shall we? Today's fascinating facts. So today's fascinating facts on this day in 1823. This is a good one. The death of Edward Jenner. Of course, who was he? Well, he was the pioneer of the smallpox vaccine. He's also sometimes referred to as the father of immunology. It's been said that his work has saved more lives than the work of many other men. On this day in 1841, Hong Kong was proclaimed British sovereign territory. And on this day in 1968, before my time, I have to say, the National Provincial Bank and the Westminster Bank merged to form the National Westminster Bank. And those are today's fascinating facts.
It's a weekend breakfast, start your day right. We serve it up, laughs and the best of news. With David and Duncan, it's a weekend cruise.
Well, a very good morning to you. 4 minutes past 6 on Sunday, January the 26th. A very good morning to you. Thank you very much indeed for joining me. And not just me, I'm delighted to say, joining us once again, Duncan Barks, broadcaster. Good morning.
Morning. Happy Australia Day.
Yes, so it's Australia Day.
Love Australia. Never been, want to go.
Hang on a minute, you love Australia, never been?
Everything I hear about Australia, I love.
Yeah, mad, because it's basically you do a bit of work, then you lie on the beach, you drink tinnies
and barbecued chicken on the beach.
Brilliant.
Yeah, it's great. And Australia is everything this country appears not to be. And the more this country heads down the route it's heading, I think I want to go to Australia. And I love the music that comes from Australia. 80s bands like Midnight Oil.
Midnight Oil. Jason Donovan. Kylie.
Jason Donovan, yeah.
Kylie.
Men at Work, Kylie. Who can not love Kylie?
Well, indeed.
Yeah.
She looks fantastic for
Doesn't
her
she?
age, yes. For her age. She's exactly the same age as me.
Really?
Australia Day.
Is she that young?
She is that young. So Australia Day is the official national day of Australia. It's observed today, as I said, marking the 1788 landing of the First Fleet and raising of the Union flag of Great Britain by Arthur Phillip at Sydney Cove, a small bay on the southern shore of Sydney Harbour. It's really interesting, Australia, isn't it? Of course, it's still part of the Commonwealth. Of course, they had the referendum on whether they remain as part of the Commonwealth. The King is still head of state of Australia. And you're right, in many ways we got it wrong. We sent all the prisoners to Australia. We stayed here. I think we got it the wrong way around.
I think so. Without question. I just like the idea of Australia. Have you been?
I have, actually.
Where have you been?
I worked in Rockhampton as a flying doctor.
Really?
I worked in Sydney as well. It was it was amazing. And going back, it's really interesting, actually. Culturally, they imported a lot of stuff from the United Kingdom. So we wore polo shirts with stethoscopes, shorts, long socks, which is a throwback to sort of colonial...
Up to your knees?
Up to our knees.
Really?
Yeah.
So we heard earlier the theme tune from Neighbours. Wasn't there a TV show called Flying Doctors?
Yes, there was.
Wasn't there?
Yeah. Wow. It was fantastic. I loved working there. It was great fun. They work really, really hard, but they also know how to have fun and enjoy themselves.
Yeah.
And that, I think, really sets us apart. I mean, I have many Australian friends, actually. A friend of the programme, Steve Milne, of course, Australian, and Davis Fang, Australian as well. Yeah. So it's interesting. I wonder whether they will actually vote to leave the Commonwealth. The Australian government and Prime Minister Anthony Albanese, do you remember he promised to hold a referendum? That's been put onto the back burner now. Yeah. And I don't know how I think that sort of the polls change all the time as to whether they want to stay part of the Commonwealth.
I think it's a generational thing, isn't it? Because the generations coming through won't have that connection necessarily that their parents or grandparents had. So I think we could see a time where Australia decides to leave the Commonwealth. That said, the current form of the royal family with William and Kate, I think is the best it's been for a while. I'm quite a royalist, you know, I love King Charles, but it's fair to say that the royal family's had a rocky few years, so you never know, maybe Kate and Wills can turn on the charm in Oz.
Yeah. I would agree with that, absolutely agree. I think they sort of epitomise the new face of the monarchy, and I think young people, particularly around the Commonwealth, can see themselves in William and Kate. Shall we move to rather more serious matters? Let's start with this big story in the Sunday Telegraph this morning, if you are just joining us. The headline is Reeves at war with Labour blockers. Now, it's been a very tricky time for Rachel Reeves, for the government, and of course, I'm amazed that Reeves is still in position, quite frankly, as Chancellor. But Rachel Reeves has said she will not tolerate blockers from within her own party standing in the way of her plans for growth. She says, and this is a warning to the Labour MPs and peers, basically, do not put your own interests above those of the country. So she is saying we need to build the houses, 1.5 million homes in 5 years, which is the same target as the former Conservative government as well. And she basically is now saying, and the speech which she is going to give is on Wednesday, she says essentially the default answer for planning will be yes. She is going to sort of say that environmental groups and all those lobby groups that kick everything into the long grass will be over. Those days are over. There's one other thing that's really important about what she's saying. There will be a sort of planning granted to developments around train stations, and what many people are saying. And whilst I do actually welcome that, what does it mean for those rather smaller villages and towns that are on the train network? But then one might argue that's a brilliant thing to actually kickstart the economy in rural areas.
It's got to be balanced, hasn't it? Because at the moment, and we see this with various governments, they can't do nuance. They run from one side of the ship to the other, and the balance needs to be, look, we need more houses. There are generations who are beneath me and beneath you who can't get on the property ladder in many parts of the United Kingdom, but London and the South East is just a pipe dream for many, right? So we need more properties being built, and the mantra at the moment is let's just ride roughshod over what we would call NIMBYs, not in my backyard, which I don't think is the answer. You need people to buy in locally to what you're trying to do. In my part of the world, and I always talk about it when I'm here on Talk because I come from West Sussex, it's predominantly rural. I live in a place called Chichester. Outside Chichester, there are a lot of villages, and you used to have the gaps in between villages. I know this sounds quite parochial, but you know, there'd be countryside in between the villages, and increasingly those gaps are disappearing and those villages are losing their identity because they're expanding, because they have housing targets, etc., and those are only going to those targets have increased. We're going to see more house building. My biggest issue regarding this, regardless of where it is in the United Kingdom, is it's all well and good saying, listen, we're going to build loads of houses, vote for us, it's fantastic. You know, the Tories tried it with the last government, Labour are trying it now. What they always forget is the infrastructure that's needed
100%
to support all these houses that are being built. So from a very basic level, GP surgeries, schools, roads. We have a sewage system in the UK that goes back to Victorian times. We already know that the water companies can't keep track of what's happening with sewage. We're not improving those sewage systems at the same time as building these houses. So what's going to happen? There's more pressure on the water system, and I think there's only more problems coming down the pipe.
I've mentioned this before. The way they build in Europe is very different to the way we build here. So they put the infrastructure in first before they build a single house, and that to me seems eminently sensible.
It's common sense.
Well, it is really, and I don't know why we don't do that.
I don't know either, but it seems to me a lot of the objections, understandable objections, are not from so-called NIMBYs going, I don't want houses here. It's, hang on a second, this road is already clogged, right? You build a housing estate with 450 houses on here, the road is going to get worse.
And of course, where I live in Suffolk, they are trying to build on floodplains, for example, and of course the reason the floodplains are there is for a very good reason. There's also, in terms of infrastructure, it's not just doctors and nurses, surgeries and all that kind of stuff. It's supermarkets.
Of course it is. And
we just don't have the competition in the rural communities that we do in London, for example.
Indeed. So, going back to Chichester in West Sussex, I'm not in payment of the local Tories board, by the way, but there are a lot of houses being built in an area where there's a big old Sainsbury's supermarket, which is fantastic. That supermarket used to have a pharmacy in there. The pharmacy has been closed for a couple of months. So that's just an example that you're building the houses, you need to go and get some pills or whatever. You don't have that facility immediately on the doorstep. But going back to this story about Rachel...
But also it's a monopoly for Sainsbury's.
Yeah, absolutely.
isn't it?
It is. It is. And I'm all for that. If you have retail parks where all of your needs are catered for, that's a good thing.
Yes, but I want to see an Asda next to that Sainsbury's,
exactly.
for example, so that you do have the choice. And what we're seeing, and particularly in my hometown or the town near my village, is that we've got one supermarket and the prices are sky high because they know they've got you. And particularly elderly people who cannot drive, then they have you. Absolutely have you. And the prices are astronomical.
Choice is always the answer.
Exactly. Now, Rachel Reeves, this is very interesting. So we've got Ed Miliband, and we talked about this yesterday.
Mad Ed
over here saying, oh, look, windmills everywhere because that's going to be the panacea to everything. 1% last week, 1%.
And he still can't answer the question, if the wind's not blowing and the sun's not shining, what happens?
He doesn't know.
He doesn't know the answer.
And I was saying this yesterday. He was in East Anglia talking to the local news organisation saying that this is why we need windmills and we need pylons across amazing farmland, arable farmland. Anyway, that's slightly beside the point. But Ed Miliband over here, Rachel Reeves over here, she's now saying the economy trumps net zero. We were talking about this before we came on air. There is no concerted thought process going on through government.
No, they're lurching from one side to the other because I think the first 6 to 7 months of this government has been so appalling that they're looking for anything to help them. So now it's like anything to do with growth. Let's have a third. Let's get the third runway at Heathrow built. Now, I'm well up for this.
So am I.
I'm well up for this. I mean, I remember, where are we now, 2025, 13 years ago, doing debates on various radio stations about should we have a third runway at Heathrow and all of the arguments for and against. And here we are, 13 years later, and nothing has happened. I'm up for this in a different way because if it means that this government, and I'll be very partial about this, which I think is the worst government I remember, if we start seeing splits in this party, that's a great thing. So Ed Miliband is going to have to, he's either going to have to back the third runway, which makes a mockery of everything else he's saying. Sadiq Khan has already said he might look at a legal challenge. That's the Labour Mayor of London against a third runway. Bring it on.
Well, enter stage left, Sadiq Khan, with his legal response to this. But also, as Mayor of London, really, this is none of your business. I know it's in London, but this should be about national planning infrastructure. And that is where I do agree with the government, that there needs to be some sort of national plan. And if it is of national significance, then I think, you know, there should be a body that oversees that. So that's going to be very interesting. And of course, what we're also going to see is the fracturing of the MPs elected for their local constituents versus the party. Now, of course, they have a huge majority at the moment, but you're already seeing people like Sarah Coombs, the MP for West Bromwich, speaking up against 200 homes being built in her constituency. John Whitby, the MP for Derbyshire Dales, opposing 70 homes on the same day that ministers actually said we're going to increase housing targets. And then Sadiq Khan as well. So I think you're right. You're going to see fracturing of that party.
Yeah, well, this is government, isn't it? This is 14 years in opposition. Now you have to deal with the realities of being in government, and when you're in government, you become more accountable. So if you're an MP and you represent a constituency where you're going to have a load of housing targets forced upon you, and your constituents come to you and say, hang on a second, we don't want this, you're a Labour MP, you're going to have to decide if you're a party person or you're going to represent your people. I mean, it's not just a house building, is it? Because there's some suggestions this morning in some of the Sunday papers that we've got some MPs who want a wealth tax. Well, that will go against Rachel Reeves. There was some stuff in yesterday's newspapers about she's potentially looking at curbing sickness benefits. Well, there'll be a lot of Labour MPs who will be thinking, hang on a second, I didn't stand for election, and now I'm elected, and I'm going to have to be asked to vote to cut welfare payments. But this is grown-up politics.
It is.
Yeah.
It's about being in power, as opposed to being in the opposition. Let's just talk about this front page of the Mirror. I'll deliver for working people. As many of you know, I absolutely hate this expression, working people. Who isn't a working person? But anyway, Rachel Reeves has vowed ordinary people will be better off on her watch as she sets her sights on smashing obstacles holding the economy back. She says, I'm going to put money in people's pockets faster. We're going to go further. We're going to go faster. There is no return to austerity. Now, this is a complete juxtaposition to what we're being told by everyone else. She also yesterday said there are going to be 6 interest rate cuts. Well, according to whom?
Exactly. What we're seeing here, I think, is a bit of a reset from the Chancellor. She's received a lot of criticism for her budget right across the board, and I'm sure we'll talk about the farmers a little bit later on and various other measures. You've got the business organisations just saying, what are you doing with the increase in employers' NI contributions? whacking up the minimum wage. You don't have to go too far in the papers or on the media to hear business people just going, this is going to kill my company or my organisation. We know it's a disaster for UK business. We also know that the last 6 to 7 months of this government has just not been great. And she started off, I think she made 2 errors, Rachel Reeves. First off, she out of nowhere came this winter fuel payment stuff, which has given her a load of negative headlines. And her first major speech literally talked down this country and this government and the economy, where we then ended up with investors going, I'm not going to invest in Britain while this woman is in charge. She has no faith in her country. And it's all coming back to haunt her. So I think this is a bit of a reset, which is, oh, hang on a second, I need to be maybe learning from people like Donald Trump and taking a leaf out of his book and really talk up Britain.
Well, because she says, I want working people to be better off, we need to go further and faster.
Yeah.
When you look at the wording of this, and it's really, I think it is quite seismic. I'm going around selling Britain. This is basically, as she returns from Davos, I'm selling Britain and making people know this is a government that is doing things differently. You're not kidding. It's working, the government is working with businesses. No, it isn't. It's not working against business.
That's what it seems. And these are great words that she said at Davos and indeed elsewhere. She gave an interview, an exclusive interview to the Times newspaper yesterday, where she talked about boosterism when we refer to this economy and stuff. All words that she's not used before. She talked about the great entrepreneurs we have in this country. This is a bit of a U-turn, because I think she realises that in order to get growth, you need to sell the concept of Britain genuinely as a place to invest and do business to an awful lot of people. She said some nice words. Let's see if there's actually any actions to back it up.
And of course, I think it's worth just reminding ourselves we lost 10,800 millionaires in 2024. That is double the number who left in 2023. They pay about £400,000 in tax.
Exactly.
And of course, that's losing 500,000 taxpayers.
You've got that going on. You've also got hard and fast evidence out there. I mean, one of the most recent announcements, and we were talking about supermarkets earlier, Sainsbury's saying they're axing 3,000 jobs.
Yeah.
When that report came out 48 hours ago, you had the management of Sainsbury's directly saying this is because of the measures she implemented or she announced in the budget. All of the signs are there. So again, these words are fantastic, but Rachel, come on, you need some hard and fast actions here.
So there are so many other stories of come on, Rachel. There are so many.
Rachel.
Come on, Rachel. There are so many stories actually that all link into this. But I will just mention the front page of the Observer, which we'll talk about more after the break. But this is the front page of the Observer. It's really fascinating, the pivot here. Move closer to Europe, not Trump, voters tell Starmer. Keir Starmer under growing pressure to forge closer economic links with Europe 5 years on from Brexit. It's worth remembering Brexit was 5 years ago on Friday.
Yeah.
As I keep saying, we haven't Brexited properly. No. We have put in place the building blocks of this, but we haven't diverged enough. But she is now coming back and saying, this is what Rachel Reeves told The Observer, Brexit has harmed the UK economy. She is determined to claw back some of the lost GDP by reducing trade frictions for UK small businesses. Where do you stand on this?
Well, that's a big question. So I don't think we've had a proper Brexit, and I would say that happened for 2 reasons. One, the government at the time in 2016, when Brexit happened, did not even have a plan in place.
And of course, Cameron legged it.
Cameron did a runner. Osborne did a runner. They did not have a plan in place for this country should the majority of people vote leave, which of course they did. For me, that's a dereliction of duty, right? That's the first problem. The second problem is we had a government at the time who were too busy squabbling amongst themselves, you know, in an embarrassing way. And you know, a load of them disappeared off to set up Change UK, some political party and stuff.
Chuka-Uма.
You know, so all of that, Chuka-Uma, Anna Soubry, all of that leads us to where we are now, which is we've not had a proper Brexit because there was no genuine will from the government at the time, or indeed the civil service. I also think, and I bristle against this idea that as a nation we have to choose between the EU or America.
100%.
I'm going to nick the words of Boris Johnson, and I'm going to probably misquote him ever so slightly. You know, this idea about, you know, you want to have your cake, Britain, and you want to eat it. Well, that's the whole point of having cake, right? So, you know, we came out of the European Union because we wanted more relaxed trade rules so we could trade around the world, including with America, because we couldn't have a UK-US trade deal when we were part of the EU without the EU being an agreement, because it had to be an agreement of one bloc, right? Well, now, less of those restrictions, less of those ties. We should be trading with the US quite happily and with the EU. End of.
Well, it smacks of desperation, actually, if Rachel Reeves has to resort to saying, actually, the problems and the economic woes of this country is because of Brexit. No, it isn't, actually. It's because your budget and because what you did with employers' national insurance, what you're doing with the farmers. We'll also talk about that, front page of the Sunday Express, a national show of unity over a disaster. And that got me thinking, the front page of the Observer, that's why I wanted to do it just before the break, because Rachel Reeves says, in her words, that Brexit has harmed the UK economy. So do you agree with Rachel Reeves that Brexit has damaged the UK? And also, do you agree with Keir Starmer, or the voters that are telling Starmer, we need to move closer to Europe and not Donald Trump? Doesn't that undo the whole basis and ethos of Brexit in the first place? The number 0344 499 1000, calls charged at the national rate. You can follow and message us on X at talkTV. You can text the word talk in your message to 87222. Duncan will return after this break. This is Weekend Breakfast. Good morning.
Government borrowing costs hit a 27-year high, and the pound is taking a pounding. Gloomy economic data is expected to show inflation and growth are off course.
Let me ask again, and can you please be clear, will Rachel Reeves be your Chancellor for the duration of this parliament?
Rachel Reeves is doing a fantastic job. She has my full confidence, and she has the full confidence of the entire party.
Can Rachel Reeves hold on as Chancellor?
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Welcome back. This is Talk Weekend Breakfast, 6:27. I'm joined by Duncan Barks this morning, broadcaster. Just a quick reminder, if you don't know, James Murray MP will be interviewed by James Max. He is the Exchequer Secretary to the Treasury. That's about 10:40 this morning. And then the leader of Reform UK, Nigel Farage, will be in the studio here in this very room with James Max as well. That's later this morning. Don't miss that. You can put your questions to Nigel as well, I assume. That's all still still to come here on Talk. Let's talk more about this front page of The Observer. This is Move Closer to Europe, not to Trump, voters tell Starmer. Keir Starmer under growing pressure to forge closer links with the EU. Rachel Reeves admits that Brexit has damaged the UK. A major new poll shows voters clearly favour prioritising more trades with the EU over the US. This is an MRP survey of 15,000 people, so the sample size is very large. Yeah. It is chunky. For Best of Britain think tank, shows more people in every constituency in England, Scotland and Wales back closer arrangements with the EU rather than with more transatlantic trade with Washington. But as I said to you in the break, it also depends what exactly was the question you asked. Because if you asked me, has Brexit been a success, my response would be no. But that doesn't mean that it wasn't the right decision. It just means we haven't enacted it.
I think you're right. Are Best for Britain, aren't they an organisation that want closer ties with the EU? Right, just thought I'd flag that. And you're right, we don't know the question that was asked. I don't think we're seeing the true benefits of Brexit for the reasons I loosely outlined 5 minutes ago. I don't think we have Brexited properly, but also there's not really been the will or the ability from the last government, because it was very split on this, and we know Conservative MPs did everything possible to stop Brexit happening, some of them, to actually make it work. It's that simple. So there's a lag before we're going to see any benefit. And the benefit may take another 5 years, it may take another 10 years. But I think one thing is clear, the overtures that are coming out of the Labour Party at the moment seem to want, and the Labour government, seem to want closer ties to the EU.
And what does that look like? Does that mean a customs union, a single market?
Exactly. I don't know what it looks like. I mean, there is... I'm slightly warmer to the idea that maybe having freedom of movement for under 30s is not a bad thing. And if I was a political party, i.e. the Conservatives, scratching around for some policies, because they need some at the moment, because nobody seems to know what they stand for, I could look at that and think, actually, if we can find a way of making this work, that's a way of harnessing the younger vote.
But also, if you come to the end of that visa, you're out.
Yeah.
That is the whole point.
And I get really fed up with this idea. I have conversations with people in all kinds of places, and I try not to talk about Brexit because, you know, like yourself, Dave, well, I was, you know, working full-time...
Persona non grata.
Well, no, I was working full-time in the media in 2016. I bear the scars. I've done all of the debates, and, you know, I don't want to revisit the arguments because people aren't prepared to hear them and they won't move on them. But, you know, it is this idea that it's somehow damaged this country.
But also, for me, there's a much bigger issue. We didn't Brexit properly. We annexed Northern Ireland. We put a border in the Irish Sea. So we've got this ridiculous situation at the moment where we don't have full sovereignty over the United Kingdom. That, for me, is a major issue. And, of course, Northern Ireland remains in the single market. When we actually look at the trade agreements that have been put in place, and we could have done far more, we have rolled over trade agreements with the EU. We've signed new trade agreements with the EU, Australia, New Zealand, the CPTPP, Ukraine, Eastern and Southern Africa. I think one of the, and many more besides. But we also have tariff-free access anyway with the EU. But it's worth remembering, part of the problem has been communication. If you don't tell the public consistently, what have you done? What are the benefits? But we also haven't taken advantage. I would have slashed tax and say, actually, we're going to undercut other countries to make the UK more competitive.
Yeah, and we're able to do that, and we haven't done it.
Of course we are.
And again, it comes back to the point I made earlier. The last government, I think under, you know, various different prime ministers, didn't really have the will or the drive to want to do this. And I think we are in a position now where if we wanted to reduce our tax rates, we can do it because we're not part of the European Union. Do it.
Do it, and you're exactly right. And of course, if you want to remove VAT or add VAT, which we're now seeing with private schools, we are now entitled to do that because we are a free, sovereign democracy. Also, one of the other things where I think we've let fishermen and fisherwomen down is over our fishing. So we are slowly regaining our rights to our fishing waters. It's far too slow, as far as I can see. Essentially, we're only getting 25% of our fishing waters back. That was I think it was a foolhardy agreement, personally.
I agree. And just on that, whenever you hear any reports about perhaps closer ties with the European Union and
they want our fish.
They want our fish.
Yes, they want our fish.
Well, they can leave our haddock alone.
Well, quite right. Yes, I was trying to think of something pithy and funny, but I can't. So the question I'm asking this morning, do you agree with Rachel Reeves that Brexit has damaged the UK? Also, those people who said, actually, what we want is a closer relationship with Europe and not a Donald Trump. Let me know your thoughts on that, please. 0344 499 1000. Those calls charged at the national rate. Text the word talk in your message to 87222. Also, it's worth remembering, Europe is a declining market. Let's look at the rest of the world, shall we? And I think your point about you can have your cake and eat it thereof is a good one. Lots of messages coming in on all of this. Good morning, David. Good morning. This is George in Birmingham. Excellent topics being debated this morning. Brexit has not damaged the UK economy. Successive governments have. Trump has realised that you bring down the cost of energy, you bring down the costs of doing business. That was the point I made yesterday. Meanwhile, the UK is on an insane net zero policy where no matter the weather, we still have the highest energy costs in the world. I don't understand this. We are going hell for leather to get to net zero when we contribute 1% of emissions, global emissions. Meanwhile, China, India, building coal-fired power stations. Why are we doing it?
In one word, 2 words, 3 words. It's a cult.
It's a con.
Well, is that as well?
Yeah.
That's quite an interesting advertising slogan. It's a cult, it's a con. I mean, we seem obsessed by it. I think there are some politicians who think there are votes in it, but our contribution to the worldwide emissions situation is absolutely tiny. There is an argument to say, oh, well, we should lead by example, but not at the cost of our economy, which is what's going to happen.
I just want to bring your attention to something which is not a front page, but it's page 10 of the Mail. Only 1 in 10 people now thinks Labour is doing a good job in government, as Keir Starmer experiences a cliff-edge collapse in support.
That many?
Which is unprecedented, apparently, according to this article. In the modern era, exclusive polling data published in the Mail on Sunday is likely to shake Chancellor Rachel Reeves, revealing, wait for this, only 2% think the economy is in good shape. What's wrong with those 2%?
I don't know. I don't know where they're living. Maybe under a rock. I'm not surprised by any of that. As we've talked about previously, David, this government has got off to an appalling start. An appalling start.
I mean, it's textbook, isn't it, of how not to... My Ladybird book of how not to run government.
Yeah, exactly. Janet and John 1A. You know, don't come into government and make an announcement about slashing winter fuel payments without any mandate. You know, I mean, it's just been embarrassing. And I think we are seeing a little bit of a reset, but I think it goes far deeper, this. And I've been thinking about this over the weekend. I think there's a fundamental problem with the people who are at the top level of government. So let's talk about Keir Starmer. Let's talk about Rachel Reeves. Keir Starmer, to me, lacks any real personality, okay? I think we live in an era now, more so than ever, of personality politics, right? To get cut through, to get your message across to people, to get people to vote for you, you have to be likeable. And for me, it's the test of, would you want to go and see a football match with this person or have a pint with them? And Keir Starmer does not pass that test, and neither does Rachel Reeves. And I think that is a fundamental issue in terms of their ability to communicate. They're not great, and I don't think there's any real personality there, and it matters.
I also think there's no conviction. I don't think they know what they believe in. It's like, here is a basket or a tub of policies. Pick a policy, any policy.
I think there's an element to that. I also think there was I think they know what they believe in. I think they're dyed-in-the-wool socialists. That's what I think.
But they're trying to cover it up.
And now... They've got into government with this massive majority, which they think means everyone in the country supports them. Well, they don't. They got into government because people were fed up of the last 14 years. And people will say to me, Duncan, we just thought we should try someone else.
And of course, there's buyer's remorse. And of course, the left wing are now causing Starmer trouble. And we'll talk more about that as well. Just very quickly, before we go to the break, I just have to tell you this story. This broke this morning that Donald Trump, the US president, said, Prime Minister Keir Starmer has done a very good job thus far. That means he's out. Right, let's go to a break. After the break, I'm going to talk about the farmers. We haven't forgotten the farmers. They mounted a protest yesterday. We'll talk more about that after this break. This is Weekend Breakfast.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile. The home of common sense. This is Talk.
Welcome back. Weekend Breakfast. Duncan Barks joins me this morning. So many of you getting in touch. I'm asking this morning, do you agree with Rachel Reeves that Brexit has damaged the UK? We haven't Brexited, Rachel. Remember, what did you do to Northern Ireland? Well, not you, but actually, what did we do to Northern Ireland? We haven't taken advantage of that. We haven't cut tax. Oh, no, that's right, because you put it up. Also, this is according to this big MRP poll. We should move closer to Europe and not to Donald Trump, according to a poll of 15,000 people. What do you think of that? 0344 499 1000, calls charged at the national rate. Text the word TALK in your message to 87222. You can message us on X as well. Good morning to Graham in Leeds. David, Britain should, without doubt, be a state of America. A state of America, and not Europe. Of course, Donald Trump is trying to get Greenland.
He's trying to buy Greenland.
Which is pretty audacious. I'm not sure Denmark's very happy about that. Good morning, David. This is a big fan. Anthony, good morning to you in the United States. Yeah, I'm a big fan, David. Brexit is not the issue. Wishing all of you in the UK the very best. Thank you, Anthony. Very good morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you are in the United States. Good morning, David. Now, David, says David Thomas, I would like to know which voters are saying we need closer ties with Europe. It's just Starmer's ridiculous way of trying to justify his globalist agenda. We need protection from this man, or I feel that this summer will be a series of dynamic consequences to the mismanagement of Great Britain. Keep all of these coming in. James in Coventry said, we should definitely not move closer to Europe because it's not Brexit that was wrong. It's the politicians that have failed miserably to implement what people democratically voted for. James in Coventry, thank you. Sean in Gloucester, one of our regulars. Good morning, David. Great show. Thank you. Thank you very much. Labour are so ideological, they're completely blind to what this country needs. They'll even look at the USA and what Trump is doing and still think he's wrong. And they're right, even though every single thing in this country is on a downward spiral. I'm dreading the state of the country when we're finally rid of these dangerous idiots. Nigel will have his work cut out when he's in number 10. That's a great segue to tell you he is joining James Max in this very studio later on this morning. Of course, Nigel is leader of Reform UK, currently polling number 1 of all the political parties, according to that poll yesterday. Also, James Murray MP, Exchequer Secretary to the Treasury, will be joining James at 10:40. Do get in touch. Let James know what questions you want to ask James Murray, and also Nigel Farage, your thoughts are on everything that is going on. I'm so pleased this is front page of the Sunday Express this morning. National show of unity over tax disaster. What am I talking about? I'm talking about farmers. It had all gone rather quiet. So farmers across Britain have warned Rachel Reeves they will not let her decimate their futures without a fight, as they staged a dramatic show of unity, as you can see here, in opposition to her tax plans. Now, tractors, as you can see, livestock arrived in town centres around the UK. This is yesterday. And the Countryside Alliance and many people involved in this campaign have actually said farmers and their supporters will not stop fighting back against the damaging family farm tax. The policy is hated by the countryside, by businesses and the public, including Labour's own voters. It's interesting, this, because it isn't just the farmers that are rebelling against this. It's even the supermarkets are saying, hang on a minute, this is wrong. We're going to impoverish farmers. They will have to sell their land. That means less food security. It also means that we won't get food in our shops.
Exactly. And I mean, during the week, Tesco came out in support of the farmers, and rightly so. So, you know, the part of the country that I come from is a big rural area, once again in West Sussex. When I drive up from London, I go past a farmer's gate, place called Duncton, and there's a big banner that says stand with a farmer, not with Starmer, and rightly so. I went to Whitehall when the first protest took place in November, when the tractors were there and the farmers were there to record a podcast, to do a podcast for the Taxpayers Alliance called A Nation of Podcasters. And sorry, A Nation of Taxpayers. Good plug, thank you. And what we do is, well, I spoke to a lot of farmers, and for me, it's you can talk to politicians about it, and of course politicians have a role to play in this, but the story here is about the very real impact this will have on farming families, and we don't get enough of this on the media.
I would agree.
We have it on Talk from time to time, but it's very easy to talk to someone from the Countryside Alliance, great organisation, and the NFU, National Farmers Union, great organisation. They're going to bat for farmers, but on this podcast, I was able to talk to a young guy who works on a farm it was Herefordshire, and he was able to explain what this means. And for those who maybe just lost track of this a little bit, essentially, Rachel Reeves, as Chancellor, announced in the budget inheritance tax on family farms, so over £1 million. So if it's valued at £1 million, you're going to have to find £200,000 inheritance tax. That's a hell of a lot of money. A lot of people don't have that money, which means they end up selling the farm. And there are countless examples of this. And still what we're seeing is the government saying, oh, there's only going to be a handful of farms affected by this. And yet the National Farmers Union and the Countryside Alliance go, no, 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 this is going to affect hundreds of family farms. You need to revisit this.
So Downing Street is saying only 550 farms will be affected. The NFU says it's 70,000. Now there's some discrepancy there. There are 209,000 farm holdings in the UK. What is interesting is if you look in Cabinet, there is no rural representation at all, so they don't actually know what a farm is. But also, just in terms of that, £1 million farm is tiny.
It is. And
so the majority, and they're asset rich and they're cash poor.
Exactly that. And I think there's a misconception that farmers are driving around in their Range Rovers and they're loaded, and they're not. The land is valuable, but they are cash poor. And if we get rid of these family farms, what's going to happen? We're going to end up being more reliant on food imports because we won't be able to produce the food this country needs. And I don't want to knee-jerk here, and I don't want to over-sensationalise, but you don't have to go too far back in history to look at a time, and I'm talking about World War II, when food security was so important. And
Dig for Britain.
Dig for Britain. And I'm a little bit old-fashioned about this. One of the things I think is a government's priority be, it should be to ensure that this nation can feed itself.
And it's very short-sighted. We have a growing obesity crisis. What we need is to have good quality food, which is grown in this country, put on plates, and so you avoid all the hyper-processing that is
exactly that. And I mean, I've got a teeny weeny bit of skin in this game. When I was a teenager, I was an Arundel young farmer, all right? So I didn't... What do you say? As you can tell.
Yeah, I can tell. From your tweed jacket.
From the tweed jacket. I wasn't part of a farming family, but I was part of Arundel Young Farmers, where basically the children of farmers get together and socialise, and you get involved in that world. And yes, I used to be able to reverse a tractor, I used to be able to, milk a cow a long time ago. But what I've seen firsthand is there's no paid holiday for these people. None. There's no sick pay if you run a farm. You're there 24/7, 365 days a year running that farm, and people seem to forget this.
And also my friends who are farmers, if you see them over harvest, they watch the weather and then they're out. And you have to harvest what you can and make sure the crops come in. What is also, I think, particularly egregious is Labour lied. Before the election, they said they had absolutely no intention of changing agricultural property relief in the run-up to the election. They kept saying, we're not going to actually affect the farms themselves. And of course, it does mean that actually what's happening is, and I think it's also the speed that this is coming in, because you've got older farmers who have no way of actually disposing of their assets and the 7-year rule in terms of inheritance tax to the younger generations. And that is what Downing Street keeps saying, oh, well, you can pass it on and make sure that you live 7 years. Well, it's not actually that easy. We are going to be talking to David Exwood at 7:40 this morning. He is a farmer. He is also Deputy President of the Farmers Union, and it will be absolutely fascinating to hear from him what the impact of this is going to be on farmers, and the fact they only are able to have this £1 million tax-free and then pay 20% on the rest of it. Just in terms of that, I was just looking at DEFRA. When you look at actually who is on DEFRA in government, they are constituency MPs for Streatham.
Oh, yes.
That well-known countryside location.
Massive rural community.
Cambridge, Coventry and Hull.
And going back to the point you made earlier, David, the Environmental Secretary, Steve Reed, right? What does he represent? Croydon.
Yeah.
And here's a man who incidentally got his wellies, his very posh wellies, bought for him by Lord Ali.
Yeah. The other thing is, when you look at the sums here, and I don't think the government is very good at sums, when you look at inheritance tax on farms, it raises 500 million, which is equivalent to NHS spending of 1.5 days.
Yeah. I just don't understand where this policy has come from. And if Rachel
Ignorance?
Reeves, well, possibly ignorance, certainly a need to raise money. And I think if you're going to be kind, let's try and be kind.
OK, let's be kind.
To Rachel Reeves and the Treasury. There are some very big businesses who buy up land as an investment, OK? And I think, you know, this kind of policy was predominantly aimed at them, but they haven't done their homework properly, the Treasury, and realised the impact it will have on family farms. And if they've got any sense, they will remove family farms from this particular bit of legislation. But I don't think they will.
They won't.
And they won't. And I think it's also, you strip it back again, it is this, oh, big money, big business, really nasty, let's go after them. And I think that's the mantra.
So do I.
And I'm glad the supermarkets have come out in support.
I am. I'm actually very surprised they have in such droves as well.
Because they don't do it often, do they?
No, they don't. And I think it's a real turning point, actually. Duncan, thank you for the moment. We'll take a break. After the break, I'll take you through all of this morning's front pages so you are totally up to speed. This is Weekend Breakfast. Good morning.
Government borrowing costs hit a 27-year high, and the pound is taking a pounding. Gloomy economic data is expected to show inflation and growth are off course.
Let me ask again, and can you please be clear? Will Rachel Reeves be your Chancellor for the duration of this Parliament?
Rachel Reeves is doing a fantastic job. She has my full confidence. She has the full confidence of the entire party.
Can Rachel Reeves hold on as Chancellor?
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Good morning, 6:53 on Sunday, Sunday, January the 26th. Lots of lovely messages. Tony in Valencia in Spain. David, you're one of the most elegant people I've seen on TV. I'm in love with your shirts. Isn't that
That's
lovely?
a good shirt, that.
Is it?
Yeah.
I think it's a deck chair, this one.
Yeah, it's good though.
Yeah, good deck chair. Yeah. Lots of other messages coming in. Sonia, I had a chat to a farmer yesterday as they had their NFU stall set up. I was shocked, and I was really shocked at how depressed he seemed. He was young and seemed to be so despondent about what Reeves is doing. It's really upsetting to see such a young farmer so worried. Keep all of those messages coming in. I'm also asking this morning, do you agree with Rachel Reeves that Brexit has damaged the UK? And this MRP poll that says that we should move closer to Europe and not Donald Trump. Haven't we tried that once already? 0344 499 1000, the calls charged at the national rate. Let's take you through the front pages this morning. We have talked about a great deal of these. The Sunday Telegraph, there's a good place to start. Reeves at war with Labour's blockers. This is the story we talked about right at the beginning of the programme. Rachel Reeves has said she will not tolerate blockers. This is basically a warning shot to her own party. She says this is all about growth. This is the planning and infrastructure bill, which is going to be introduced. She is essentially saying to Labour MPs, right, you put the country's interest first and your own interest second. But obviously there is this brewing row between her and the economy, and then of course you've got Ed Miliband and his obsession with net zero and windmills, which he dreams of every single night, and Sadiq Khan, because she's saying that actually what we need to do is to expand Heathrow. Just going back to that point, we need more than one runway. We need to have 5 runways. We need to have actually a centre of excellence.
Absolutely, and I'm always struck by the fact that, and we've touched on this on previous programmes, that getting anything done in this country from an infrastructure point of view takes forever. And countries like France, China, get their runways built within literally inside a year.
They're really good at infrastructure.
And we need more of it.
We do. You know? There's another great story, actually. Chagos giveaway on the brink as Iran fears spook Trump allies. Donald Trump, obviously, we've got the Chagos Islands, which Keir Starmer thinks is a brilliant idea to give away to Mauritius, even though it's strategically really important.
And to pay them £9 billion.
9 billion quid.
For the privilege.
Have an island and 9 billion because we don't need it. And of course, it's really important because it's got Diego Garcia, the strategically important military base on that. Mauritius has opened talks with Iran.
Wow.
And so, therefore, Iran could use the Chagos Islands to spy on the military base and, therefore, on us. I mean, not thought through at all. We'll speak more about that later on. Let's move to the front page of the Mirror. I'll deliver for working people. Yet more words, I think hot air, really, from Rachel Reeves. We spoke about that this morning already. Moving on to the Sunday Express. National show of unity over tax disaster. Farmers across Britain staged a defiant show of unity yesterday to make it clear to Rachel Reeves they will not let her decimate their futures by rolling tractors into towns and villages across the UK. I hope you saw them. I hope you did talk to them because they really are struggling. We'll move on to The Observer. This is the big story we're talking about this morning. Move closer to Europe, not Trump, voters tell Starmer. An MRP survey of 15,000 people by YouGov, so a big sample, says that we need to have a closer relationship with Europe, even in Clacton, which is Nigel Farage's seat. I'm sure James Maxwell will be talking to Nigel about that, about his response to that, and whether we should move closer to Europe. As Duncan says, though, why can't we have our cake and eat it, which is essentially have a good relationship with Europe, tariff-free trade with Europe, at the same time make sure we get a really good deal with the United States. And it is worth remembering, of course, Donald Trump loves this country, and he is talking about coming here as one of his first visits. So that is the front page of The Observer. The Sunday Times, Southport, the fatal errors. This is obviously about Axel Rudiker-Barner being referred to Prevent 3 times. And counter-terrorism officers believe that Axel Rudiker-Barner had an interest in world news and current affairs, but no cause or political belief, and was not in danger of being radicalised. There is a big issue here about Prevent, and from what I've heard from people who've been through that, they concentrate on far-right ideology rather than Islamic extremism.
Yeah, and it's not just about what people are looking at online, it's also about a person's behaviour. because he was caught on a bus, wasn't he, with a blade? You know, he'd taken a blade into school. All of this stuff should have been red flags to people.
And the father stopped the taxi taking him into the school in a previous occasion.
Massive failures right across the board.
Absolutely. The front page of the Mail, Strictly stars vile sexual jibe to dancer. The BBC apparently plunged into a fresh crisis last night after a Strictly Come Dancing star was caught on film by the Mail on Sunday, making a vile sexual comment about one of the show's female hosts. This is Wyn Evans. You'll know him as the tenor for the Go Compare ads. And a BBC radio presenter was recorded crudely suggesting a three-way sex session with presenter Jeanette Manrara using the highly demeaning term spit roast. It's a bit early on a Sunday to be discussing that. By the way, he has just apologised. And then inside that, page 10, just one voter in 10 says Labour is doing a good job. The Sun on Sunday, Holly's kidnap bid tears. This is Holly Willoughby has told of her murder and kidnap plot terror, admitting nothing can ever prepare you. The first interview she has given. Sunday People says revealed Ronnie Cray's lost tape. And the Daily Star, apparently this is the big news story of the day. Slapheads are 100% stud muffins. Bald blokes are totally irresistible to women, apparently. Lasses going weak at the knees for them. Experts claiming it's because slapheads have an air of confidence that men with a bushy barnet lack. That, apparently, is hilarious. More to come. This is Weekend Breakfast.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Hello, a very good morning to you. It's just after 7 o'clock on Sunday, January the 26th. I'm David Bull. This is Weekend Breakfast. Great news for you this morning if you are just waking up. It is Australia Day today, that's right. The 6th largest country in the world, the land of barbecues, koalas, which are also known, by the way, as drop bears. There's a reason for that. They drop out of the trees. And kangaroos. They celebrate the 1788 landing of the first fleet and raising of the Union flag at Sydney Cove. With now what it is, Sydney. Yeah, Australia Day.
Hold me in your arms, don't let me go. I want to stay forever, home and away with you each day.
Right, enough. It's 7 o'clock. Home and away there, of course, the land of neighbours. Home and away, of course, that compulsive viewing. Also, it's International Spouse Day today, a day dedicated to recognising spouses everywhere. Yeah, you better be on your best behaviour. You need to acknowledge the commitment you have made to each other. I've forgotten about Mr. and Mrs. Golly, that was a long time ago. It's also Dental Drill Appreciation Day. What? A day that celebrates the invention of the electric dental drill by an American dentist called George Green in 1875, and the advances that are being made in dentistry. Yeah!
OK, lie back, open wide. There, that didn't hurt, did it?
No, not at all. I hate going to the dentist, I have to say. Right, so let's move on to today's fascinating facts.
Today's fascinating facts.
Today's fascinating facts, new ones for you this hour. On this day in 1871, the Rugby Football Union was formed in London by an initial 20 clubs. Police rescued the Prime Minister, Herbert Asquith, on this day in 1910 from a crowd of angry suffragettes. This is a great one. In 1926, on this day, John Logie Baird gave a special public demonstration of television to members of the Royal Institution in London. Baird's invention used mechanical rotating discs to scan moving images into electronic impulses. I'll do one more, which I was going to save till next hour. But on this day, in 1982, Conservative Prime Minister Mrs Thatcher was elected in 1979 on the slogan, Labour isn't working. And those are today's fascinating facts.
Weekend breakfast, feeling so alive. David and Duncan, let the good times thrive. The full team's here. Who could ask for more?
A very good morning to you. 5 minutes past 7. Lots going on in the papers this morning. Sunday Telegraph, Reeves at war with Labour's blockers. This is going to be absolutely amazing how this plays out. She's saying economy first, and then you've got Ed Miliband saying, no, it's net zero. She is basically firing a warning shot at Labour, saying, do not stand in the way of planning. This is the Planning and Infrastructure Bill, which is going through this week, or she's going to make a speech on it this week on Wednesday. Lots of others. She talks about actually making sure she is standing up for working people. That's in another of the papers this morning. And then this one, The Observer, move closer to Europe, not Trump. This is according to an MRP poll of 15,000 people saying that Brexit has failed, or at least Rachel Reeves says Brexit has failed. She says Brexit has damaged the UK. Your thoughts on that and the poll that that says people say, no, we need to move closer to Europe and not to Donald Trump and the United States. What do you think of that? 0344 499 1000, calls charged at the national rate. You can text the word talk in your message to 87222. You can message us on X as well, at talkTV. So many coming in, so many voice notes. Don't forget, you can send a voice note as well. Judy has sent a voice note on Starmer. Good morning to you, Judy.
Hello, it's Judy from Altofts, West Yorkshire. Regarding Starmer saying that the voters have told him they want closer ties with the EU, he needs taking up on this. He's never in the country, and from what I can remember, the last time he went on walkabouts, he was booed and heckled. And Rachel Reeves knows she's made a cock-up of the economy. She's just doing what Labour always does. Tax and spend. They know no other way. It's wired into them.
Isn't it interesting? Thanks, Judy. You haven't minced your words there. Isn't it interesting that Margaret Thatcher got elected on that mantra of Labour isn't working, and they say history repeats itself. Let's take another voice note now as well. This is Lee in Newcastle. Good morning, Lee.
Morning, David. It's Lee from Newcastle. Just listening to you discuss the farmers. Isn't it strange that the week they announced this, after having never mentioned it before, was the week after they had a visit from Bill Gates. Bill Gates being the biggest farmland owner in America. And they will not disclose the content of that meeting, even though they've been FOI'd 3 or 4 times. And then you see Green Zealot, Mr. Ed, granting a 500-hectare deal to the guy, Dale Vance, who is the guy who wants to build solar power farms on prime farmland. Strange, that, isn't it? Great show, mate. Keep it up.
Thank you very much. Yes, isn't that strange? Duncan Barks joins me this morning. Let's do that, actually, as the first story. I was going to bring it up in this this hour. I saw this on Nick Timothy's, the Member of Parliament, on his X yesterday. He wrote, "How is this allowed? Ed Miliband has approved another giant solar and battery farm. 49% of that land, by the way, is agricultural top-graded land.
It is. It's good stuff.
It's great stuff, and it's in my neck of the woods. The applicant, Ecotricity, owned by Dale Vince. And of course, what is the connection between him and Labour? He gave them 5.4 million quid.
I'm shocked.
Are you?
Yes, surely not.
It's appalling.
Yeah, this is going to become a headache, I think, for Ed Miliband, and it's going to become a headache for other Labour MPs who have in their constituency good farming land, good agricultural land, if we have this drive to whack a load of windmills or solar panels all over the countryside. Yeah. And it will. There'll be a spark point at some point.
And this is the point. And Ed Miliband was sitting there trying to justify why we need to have solar panels across prime agricultural land in East Anglia, but also, not only that, the transmission capability with pylons going across people's gardens.
It's bizarre. It's bizarre. I mean, I'm not against using solar panels. What I'm against is where they're going.
Yes.
You know, stick them on the roof of car parks, for example.
Brilliant.
Why not do that? Just take out, 48 spaces on top of a massive multi-storey and put solar panels.
Put them on the roofs of schools or hospitals.
But we seem to have just lurched into this area, which is, oh, well, there's a lovely bit of farmland over there. Let's just whack a load on there. And that gets us into the whole area regarding something else we talked about, which was about food security and the farmers and the inheritance tax. We can't afford to give up this land that currently is being used to grow food that we need.
So these two stories we're talking about, Reeves declaring war on the Labour blockers, saying economy trumps net zero. We're also saying that Brexit has damaged the UK's economy. This feels like grasping at straws to me. Meanwhile, of course, they're saying you need to move closer to Europe. There is also something else, I think, that's going on here. When Reeves is going, I think she's going to announce this week there needs to be an expansion of Heathrow. But also possibly Stansted, Luton. We don't quite know what she's going to say. That feels like, grab a policy, any policy. But there is also a really interesting article in the Telegraph saying the left are turning on Starmer, because there was a time, which really wasn't very long ago, where even the harshest critics of Starmer would have said, well, look, he's done a pretty good job of purging the Labour Party from the super left wing. And he has been extremely ruthless in doing that. And it's quite interesting. He is seen as this rather, I suppose, dry, technocratic leader. I think he's fairly ruthless, actually, in terms of removing his people who oppose him. And all of these MPs who are more left-wing are really against this cutting the winter fuel payments, the 2-child benefit cap, the wealth tax, of course, that they are now mooting that goes on to the top 1% of the country. You're seeing some sort of rebellion going on in the Labour Party itself. Of course, the counter-argument to that is he has a massive majority.
Well, but we always knew this was going to happen, because when you have a massive majority, you end up with quite a fragile coalition, because people, I think some people don't know, but in political parties, it doesn't matter if it's the Lib Dems or Reform or the Tories, just because you're under one banner, there are subsections under that banner. You have silos of people who, I might be slightly conservative, but I'm more left-wing on certain issues, but more right on others, but the Conservative Party is for me. But they managed to roughly rub along together to make it work. The problem that Starmer's now facing, he's got this whopping majority, but under the Labour Party banner, you have those who are a little bit more Blairite, people like Wes Streeting, who we might talk about a little bit later on.
We will.
But also, you've got some pretty hard left MPs who are dyed-in-the-wool socialists. And that coalition can only work for so long before you start to see the fault lines. And we're starting to see these cracks now, because you have Rachel Reeves, who I think is quite desperate for ideas, now going, oh, third runway at Heathrow, whoa, that's the answer, that's the answer. Yeah. And then you're going to get people just going, whoa, Rachel, hang on a second, we didn't sign up for this. Story that was doing the rounds yesterday, this idea that she's going to, well, she's charged government departments with spending cuts. Yep. So they have to come back to her in the next few weeks and say, this is where we think we can save money. You're going to have Labour MPs going, hang on a second, I didn't sign up for this. I believe the state should provide all. We're not here to support spending cuts. You also have the story which is about looking at the sickness benefits and trying to reduce the amount of money we spend on that. Again, you're going to have some quite dyed-in-the-wool, properly left Labour MPs who will go, I'm not supporting that, and it's going to cause friction in the Labour Party.
And of course, it's worth remembering those newly elected MPs, of course, are being sat on by the whips at the moment. They're too frightened to rebel. They're also too new to rebel. Yeah. But when they go back to their constituencies, the constituents are saying, hang on a minute, you weren't voted in to do what you are now doing. So political capital is being exhausted, and very quickly.
Yeah, and you've hit the nail on the head, David, because it's all well and good being in the Westminster bubble where you're relatively protected inside the chamber and on the parliamentary estate, where you have whips going, right, well, you know, you need to vote for this or whatever. Where the reality starts to bite is when you're on the doorstep, or you're out doing social events, or you're doing constituency visits, and people come up to you and go, I did have a word with you, right? You said, and I gave you my vote, but you said you were going to stand for this, and now you're U-turning, and that is when they go, oh, this is real life, and they don't like it, because everyone in politics has a massive ego, right? There's a reason why they go into it. Nothing wrong with that, but it's a fact of life. And when people start to criticise you personally about it, it really starts to hurt. So when you get that feedback on the doorstep, or out on the stump, as they call it, it's damaging.
So there's, I think the other thing is that as the MPs, as we come towards an election, and there was someone yesterday, one of our callers called in saying they think that Starmer should call a snap election, and which he may well do because he wants to shore up his mandate. I mean, I think he'd be obliterated if he did it. Wow. But anyway, there will be those new MPs thinking, well, look, I'm going to lose my seat anyway, so I might as well be true to my constituents and stand up for what I actually believe in. And that is the tipping point for Starmer.
It is. There was a report in yesterday's Times. It was a report all about the state of the Labour Party, and there was an anonymous Labour MP who was gave some quotes to a journalist saying, it was great, I've become an MP, and a few months ago we thought this is the beginning of my career, I can buy a dream house and everything. And apparently he now said to his wife, do you know what, let's just stay where we are, because I don't think I'll be in a job in a few years' time. And I read that and I thought, this is such a shift, isn't it, from this great July victory of last year where Labour came in and just, look at our whopping majority, we're going to rewire Britain, to actually some of your MPs briefing journalists anonymously going, do you know what, I don't think I'll be here in 2 or 3 years' time. No. Staggering.
And of course we haven't forgotten about the WASPy women, because they campaigned with the WASPy women, didn't they? I remember pictures of Angela Rayner, for example, with the WASPy women. That's being discussed and being pushed back in. Labour MPs saying they are dumbfounded by the decision that seriously undermines the trust in politicians, and rightly so. They are also deeply nervous about the rise of Reform UK, and I think it is worth just pointing out, it isn't necessarily Conservatives, disaffected Conservatives joining Reform. It is what Reform is seeing is cross-party support, people who are sick and tired of the same two-party system going to Reform. When you look at this, Keir Starmer's personal approval rating has plunged to -34.
Wow.
It's pretty bad.
So it is interesting that the Reform-Labour dynamic, I suppose, because if you look at the breakdown of the results of the last general election in July of last year, Reform came second in 98 constituencies across the country. 89 of those were constituencies that then elected a Labour MP. So 89 of those constituencies, Reform were in second place. So they're snapping at the heels. And I think, I mean, one of the stories circulating in the Sunday papers today is off the back of Wes Streeting giving a speech yesterday where he talks about Farage and Reform. I think they're rattled. I think they're scared.
I do. And actually, Streeting has gone very much on the offensive over reform, and it will be interesting. Also, I mean, of course, he's a leadership contender, isn't he?
Well, I think it's one of the papers, it's the Mail, isn't it, who is saying he's on manoeuvres.
He is on manoeuvres.
He's always been on manoeuvres. He's been on manoeuvres ever since Labour came into government.
Yeah. I mean, also, don't forget you've got noises off like Diane Abbott. Do you remember when she sat there saying Keir Starmer has no idea how normal people live because he's sitting on a fat DPP pension?
Yeah. And I think
she's right.
This is. I think there's a degree of reform benefiting from an attitude that is quite prevailing in this country, which is a plague on all their houses. They've seen the Conservative government of the last 14 years. They've seen the first 6 or 7 months of a Labour government, and are starting to think, well, maybe reform is the answer.
Yeah.
What I would say to balance that a little bit is the higher that reform go in the polls, there will be greater scrutiny of the party.
Yes.
And it's because it's very easy to say everything is wrong, but you need to start providing solutions. So reform probably needs to start outlining their policies that are watertight, so people like me and other journalists don't go, how are you going to fix this then? They need to start giving answers.
And I mean, I think it's worth remembering, and I was there when it all started, when the Brexit Party became Reform, because I was there with Richard Tice in my kitchen when we talked about it.
Yeah.
So, and initially Reform was polling at 2-3%. Now to be polling at, what, 28%?
It's amazing.
I mean, it's an extraordinary meteoric rise. I've never seen, and I'm saying this dispassionately, I've never seen anything like that in British politics.
And I think that's a very fair, and it's an unbiased comment as well. What I think is really interesting is what we're seeing around the world. So we're seeing, I don't like the term populist or populism because it's used in a negative way. So what if a view is popular? That's what the majority of people think. Let's crack on with it. It's not a bad thing to be populist. But we've seen it in Italy with Meloni. She is a centre-right politician. We've seen it in Argentina with Milei, centre-right politician. If you look at what's happening in Canada, where there'll be a general election inside the next few months, the Conservative Party are topping the polls. And then they've got Trump in the US. So we're seeing almost this wave right across the globe of people who are probably a little bit fed up of progressive, liberal, Labour politics, and they're starting to move more and more to the right. So what we're seeing with reform, potentially, is reform, or rather the UK catching up with the rest of the world.
And I think Starmer has another problem, which is the unions. And he kowtowed to the unions, promised the unions that he would be the most left-leaning Prime Minister, hasn't done that, gave them all pay rises. And of course now you're seeing the likes of ASLEF RMT saying, oh, hang on a minute, we want more.
Not only that, there's a bigger issue. So I did some media a couple of nights ago, and I was on with a bloke from the PCS union. Now the PCS union is not Labour affiliated, so they don't donate to Labour. But as we know, the Labour Party get pretty much all of their funding from the big trade unions in this country. And he was making the point, and I thought it was a really interesting point, that if Rachel Reeves goes down this route of spending cuts, remember the word austerity that was used under the Conservative government, well, this is another form of austerity, isn't it? Let's not muck around here. Just because it's Labour doesn't mean they're not capable of austerity. If they go down the route of spending cuts, you're going to see some quite chunky and heavyweight unions going, whoa, hang on a second here, you can't do this to the general public. And then you're going to have this flashpoint between the unions and Labour, who could well just go, do you know what, we're not going to fund you to the extent that we have done previously, because what you're doing is you're taking this party further to the right in terms of looking at welfare cuts. Fascinating time to be alive,
Absolutely
David.
Fascinating. Duncan, thank you for the moment. Do you agree with Rachel Reeves that Brexit has damaged the UK? Also, what do you think about this MRP poll that says we need to be closer to Europe rather than Donald Trump's United States? Your thoughts, 0344 499 1000. Those calls charged at the national rate. We'll take a break. After the break, we've got some other cracking stories I want to talk about. Don't go anywhere. This is Weekend Breakfast. Good morning.
for 5 years after the death penalty was abolished in 1965, and in that period, the capital murder rate went up 125%. The incidence of criminals taking firearms on robberies went up something like, I think, 40%. There was a huge rise that proved conclusively that it had been a deterrent.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Welcome back. This is Talk. You'll love this one. US President Donald Trump has said the Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, has done a very good job thus far, and the pair have a very good relationship. If that is the case, why haven't you actually picked up the phone? And you have been in power for what, a week? That's not very good. He was asked about the relationship as he boarded Air Force One. He says, oh no, I will give him a ring over the next 24 hours. So many of you getting in touch. Sorry, Duncan.
No, I was just going to say, it's bizarre, isn't it? Because I'm sure the protocol used to be the UK got a call. It was one of the in the top three, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Always got a call as soon as we had a new US president. But this is what, almost a week since the inauguration, a week tomorrow. And I was reading over the weekend that he's already spoken to El Salvador. Now, I don't have a problem with El Salvador, but you would have thought we'd be in front of El Salvador, wouldn't you?
Yep. You would. You would. Let me know your thoughts, please. Do you agree with Rachel Reeves that Brexit has damaged the UK? Also, this poll that says we should move closer to Europe and not to Donald Trump. Let me know your thoughts on that. Lots of voice notes coming in as well. This is Cass. Good morning.
Hi. Have you never wondered why Labour are doing these things against the people, against the country, against business? There must be an agenda, and that agenda must be to make the population dependent upon the political process, their political ideology, their political agendas. It's to make us all dependent upon them, or in other words, political enslavement. What do you think, guys?
Socialism, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
Well, the state provides everything.
But not only that, if you look at the public sector workers and then the number of people on benefits, there's actually no one paying for any of it.
No. No, and one of the things I thought was just so representative of the current government, which is, and I make no qualms about this, I think it's the worst government I've known in my life so far, and I'm happy to be proven wrong, and I'm happy to take a different view.
And you've known some governments.
I have, in a year's time, but at the moment it's just so shocking. But when Rachel Reeves introduced the employers' national insurance contribution hike in the budget, she exempted the public sector.
She did.
Right? And you just go, well, you're creating a two-tier society. You're going, public sector can do no wrong, you know, let's give them a lot of money, let's exempt them for this, and the rest of you, you pick up the tab.
But she also forgot to exempt GP practices.
Yeah, and hospices.
And hospices, and those...
care homes.
Just not thought about care homes, very good one.
A care crisis, which is only going to get worse. So she didn't exempt care homes. And
which is already struggling.
Already struggling in that sector. They can't find people for a start. And then she comes along, and I know of care home operators who are just going, well, we're going to have to shut some facilities. Sure. So what happens when you do that? Oh, it ends up going back to being an issue for the NHS effectively. And why does that matter? Because it gets you back into bed blocking, gets you back into waiting lists. I mean, none of this stuff is hard.
But again, it's like the farmers, and if you don't eat properly, then of course you get obesity problems, and that means you get ischemic heart disease, and then you end up in hospital, there aren't any beds, and round we go. Nothing has been thought through. No. Another voice note, this is Mike in Cheshire. Good morning, Mike.
Morning, David. Sounds to me like it's Psychology 101 again, just like we had during COVID.
Yeah.
It appears that they're trying to nudge us back towards Europe, and they're trying to make out that we're all happy for it. I think we're being played, as usual.
I think you're
all
right.
the best.
Thank you ever so much. I think you're right as well. Of course, David Lammy is also giving our money away to various countries as well. He's intent on doing that. This is a very interesting article. Oxfam has been accused of weaponising history. So Oxfam has published a report claiming that Britain had drained 52 trillion from colonial India, right? Talk about cherry-picking history. It argues the UK owes reparations to India for taking 52.58 trillion between 1765 and 1900. It's the first time that Oxfam has called for Western nations to pay reparations to former colonies. Now, academics, actually, to be fair to them, have all come out against it, saying the methodology is totally corrupt. They say it's corruption and weaponisation of history. And they are producing bogus history warped by ideology, which obviously might have an impact on whether people give to Oxfam in the first place. One of the academics said, and I rather like this, there is a reverse argument in which India should pay Britain for saving them from becoming part of the French overseas empire in the 18th century, or being swallowed by Tsarist Russia in the 90s, being overrun by the Japanese in the 20th, all are very rich, real threats. Also, you could argue India owes us for putting in the infrastructure, like the railways.
You can make that argument, but I think there's a far bigger issue here, is when did charities start becoming activists?
Yeah.
I grew up at a time in the 70s and 80s where you did your sponsored walk, you did your fundraising, you went around your neighbour's house,
window cleaning.
Window cleaning, or would you fill out my sponsorship form, please, Mrs. Brown, because I'm going to walk from Worthing Pier to Brighton Pier, something that I did. And it was done because charity was a good concept, and that money predominantly went to improving the lives of people with various medical conditions or whatever. And then inside the last 20 years, we have seen charities become activists. I don't know why Oxfam are getting involved in this.
Neither do I.
I wouldn't donate to Oxfam. In fact, I have a personal principle, which is I will not donate to a charity if the chief executive is earning more than the Prime Minister.
Quite right.
Because you just look at this, you think, hang on a second, how can you justify that? Why do you think you should be paid a hell of a lot more than the person running the country? And we see it right across the charity sector. They've become overtly political, 9 times out of 10 political towards the left of the political spectrum. And I don't think people who donate to these charities expect them to do that.
No. So then we have to also look at the data. Where did this data actually originate? It came from, wait for this, 2 Indian economists.
Right.
They're based in Delhi. This is Utsa Patnaik and her husband.
Hang on, 2 Indian economists who have concluded that Britain should be paying a lot more money to India.
That's right.
Oh, who would have thought it?
Who would have thought? Do you know, one of the other things that I hate more than anything is pop stars wading into politics they do not understand. So this is Chris Martin from Coldplay. He has apologised because obviously he knows a great deal about Indian history. He has apologised to his Indian fans for forgiving British colonialism. I give up. Have a look at this.
We couldn't ask for a better audience to play to, so thank you for coming today. It's amazing to us that you welcome us, even though we are from Great Britain. Thank you for forgiving us for all of the bad things Great Britain has done. And welcome us to your home.
How about thanking us for all the good stuff we did?
It's just embarrassing.
It is embarrassing.
I'm with you. Pop stars should predominantly stick to making music. I'll put my cards on the table. I'm not a Coldplay fan.
No,
I don't like their music. I think it's music for dull people. I think it's music for estate agents. I think it's music for people who don't know what music is.
Music for estate agents?
Oh, yeah. You know, I don't know what I like. I'll buy the new Coldplay album. So I'm not a fan. But this is nothing new, though, is it? In terms of pop
wading
stars.
in. But they don't know what they're talking about.
They don't. And why do they do it? Do they do it because they think they're going to get a nice round of applause at their gig? Because that's what that looks like.
I think they do it because they have a sense of grandeur and entitlement.
Yeah. Well,
adoration.
I'm not interested in anything that Chris Martin has to say or indeed play.
So there's another really interesting story, and it is quite a complicated story. This is about the British Council. Now, most people waking up this morning won't know what on earth the British Council does, but the British Council could disappear within a decade, harming the UK's global status, leaving an international vacuum, which could be filled by Russia and China. This is Scott MacDonald, the British Council's chief executive, said he has basically £250 million in budget cuts. that means losing hundreds of staff, axing the council's presence in 40 countries. Now, they actually generate 85% of their own income, so the top up from the British government isn't that much. But the British Council promotes UK, our culture, our education. Essentially, it is soft diplomacy which is enacted around the world. It's really important, and actually in the grand scheme of things, 250 million quid, how much are we spending on illegal migration?
Exactly that. Use the term soft. It's soft power, isn't it? And that is absolutely right. And it links nicely to the Chris Martin story as well that we've just talked about. You know, people like Chris Martin effectively doing this country down. We need organisations like the British Council to spread the word about Britain and what it's achieved in the past and what it can do in the future. So the British Council needs to stay. That funding needs to remain in place. It has a vital role to play.
But also, when you've got these burgeoning economies, I'm thinking particularly of China and Chinese students, they can choose from any global institution. And of course, the role of the British Council is basically to advertise British institutions and to say, why don't you come to London or
come to our universities?
Come to our universities
great.
And pay money. And of course, what happens if you go to university here? You're likely to buy a property here, and so on and so on. And all of this is really important diplomatic power, but the government doesn't seem to understand it. Wait for this. So the British Council also has quite an art collection. 200 million quid's worth of art. It was all donated by Barbara Hepworth, Steve McQueen, David Hockney, Rachel Whitered, and basically the British Council have said to the government, OK, this is a COVID debt. So they could write off this debt. It's not like they need it continuously. This is a one-off debt. So they said, we'll sell the artwork, you have the artwork, and you write off our debt. And the government said no.
Was there a reason behind their no?
No. And so what they're doing also, in terms of this, essentially they got into terrible trouble in COVID, like most people, 200 million quid loan. It's the interest that the government is charging the British Council.
But the government have written off loads of COVID loans in the past. So is this a political decision?
Probably.
Is this like, oh, the British Council, we don't like the sound of that because it promotes Britain too much?
It's probably too empirical. It's probably...
It does sound like that, doesn't it?
It does, doesn't it? Just very quickly, I have to do this. Civil servants in the tax office have been given the equivalent of 1 day off a week to promote gender ideology. This is for a job advert which was seen by the Telegraph. They're looking for a new deputy chair of an LGBT plus staff network. So apparently they can dedicate 20% of their working week to supporting the network's activity. You don't have to do this on top of your normal job. We will give you 20% of your time to dedicate to network activities. And of course, it's worth remembering HMRC is also in deep trouble at the same time for not picking up the phone when you ring them for your tax return.
Yeah, this story doesn't surprise me at all. We also see it across the public sector with union representatives who are allowed to do union business in work time. So there are parallels here. You, me, listeners to Talk this morning, we pay vast amounts of tax in this country and we fund the civil service. I don't think there should be any activities like this or union time or work on union time spent in work time. It should be outside of work hours. If you care about a cause, that is great, good luck to you, but don't expect me to pick up the tab.
Yeah, there's a great whistleblower here from HMRC, said they had sessions lasting 45 minutes on being transgender, sharing pronouns. They said in this session we were explained to us what it meant to be transgender, non-binary, intersex and cisgender. Right. Also, you had to share your preferred pronoun to demonstrate allyship to trans colleagues. I didn't know what this meant. The concept of gender-neutral pronouns, so you can be Z and Zen.
Right, I'm already confused, but I will make this observation. I've done some work in the past in the public sector, and I had a fascinating conversation with someone who's never worked outside the public sector.
Who's never worked?
And they made the observation, because I had an email address and I refused to put my pronouns at the bottom of them.
Quite right.
And also I chose not to have a rainbow lanyard. And when I was asked about it, I said, well, these are beliefs. I don't feel it's necessary to the job for me to do the job effectively. And I was told that you cannot be seen as an ally unless you have a rainbow lanyard or you have your pronouns on the footer of your email. And I struggle to understand this, because I'm fully supportive. I don't want people targeted, beaten up, penalised because of their sexuality. I'd go into bat for anyone. But don't tell me I'm by default against them just because I won't have a rainbow blooming lanyard. It's absurd that we've got to this situation where if you don't demonstrate something openly, therefore you're perceived as someone who doesn't agree with it. How did that happen?
I don't know. We'll take a break. After the break, I want to talk about this story, the front page of the Sunday Express, national show of unity over the tax disaster. This is talking about the farmers, and good on them. Yesterday, they drove their enormous tractors into towns and villages across the United Kingdom. They also delivered a petition of 250,000 signatures to Downing Street saying, essentially, you don't understand farming. We've had the big supermarkets now coming on board and supporting the farmers. I think that's quite significant, actually. That's all still to come. I'm going to be talking to David Exwood, who's a farmer. He's also Deputy President of the Farmers Union, about how their campaign is doing and whether Downing Street is actually listening. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Welcome back. This is Weekend Breakfast, 7:41 on Sunday, January the 26th. Those of you getting in touch, Daniel's on the phone from Epsom. Good morning, Daniel.
Good morning, David. How are you?
Yeah, good, thanks very much indeed. What's on your mind this morning?
Well, I kind of agree with your guest today because I'm 47 and I've run for the Conservative Party and UKIP in the past.
Right.
And even if you're neutral, I think the vast majority of the UK public looks at this current Labour government and just thinks, how on earth did they ever get into power? I mean, a lot of the quality of a lot of our MPs is quite poor, but I mean, the current crop, I mean, oh my God. And I think if you held the EU research, if you held that in Islington, you'd probably get the result that you've got now. But I think the majority of the public out there, I'm a working class boy, done well. I live in Epsom now, but I grew up in SE21. And I personally think the two main parties are in for a major shock, right? Everyone I know, every working man out there with his own little firm, everyone I go out with, the Uni Party is finished. The Con Lab Uni Party is over. I'm telling you, people have no faith. How can you, right, for the past 30 or 40 years, we've been telling successive governments, stop illegal immigration and cut legal immigration down to extremely low numbers. Anyone with eyes who lives in the UK can see that there's currently about 72 million people trying to use an infrastructure fit for about 50 million people. Right? We can all see it nothing publicly run works. Yep. We can see the decline and the degradation that mass immigration from the third world brings. And why is it that they work for us, David? They work for us, don't they? Or they're supposed to.
Well, they're meant to.
Why haven't they done what we've asked them to do?
But also, what's your response to Kemi Badenoch, who's saying, "Oh, look, we made some mistakes"? Also, under the Conservatives, it's worth remembering you let in 750,000 people into this country. You gave them visas to come into this country, and as you rightly say, we don't have the infrastructure, you don't have the schools, you don't have the hospitals, the roads don't get patched up, there are potholes everywhere. I mean, I don't need to tell you what's going wrong.
Well, but this is the thing. So I sort of think the immigration issue is the one issue that bleeds into everything. So housing, the health sector, the roads, potholes, literally everything is down to the... I mean, even the decline and degradation socially in our country. I mean, it's not the country I grew up in. It's a lot worse.
Yes.
I worry about my children's future. I mean, if you think we've got these lone wolf attacks. These are new crimes. They didn't exist when I was a kid in London. We've imported FGM, honour killing, sham marriage, suicide bombing, the full veil, grooming gangs. We've got violent black gangs in our towns and cities with guns and knives. This is all pretty new, yeah? This wasn't around 30, 40 years ago. And the majority of Britons, like myself, are saying, excuse me, we've never wanted this. We didn't ever want mass immigration. We want you to do something about it. And they ignored us, and that's why they are in for a massive, massive shock. The Con Lab Uniparty is finished. Everyone I know is voting reform. Everyone I know. Because what's that definition of madness, David? If you keep voting the same way and you keep doing the same thing and getting the same outcome, I ran for the Conservative Party in the past, but I cannot vote for them now because they didn't do fundamental things that we asked them to do. Yeah. And I just think they're in for a massive shock, David.
I think many people would agree with you, Daniel. Thank you very much, Daniel in Epsom. There's another point here, which he mentioned. He was originally from South East, SE1, I think.
Yeah.
East London. I don't recognise East London. I've been in London since I was 18. I don't recognise it. There are people there that don't share my cultural values, the cultural values of the rest of the United Kingdom. People who are wearing outfits which I think are not British. I don't think there's been any integration in the slightest into British culture, and I think we have stood by and we have been ridiculous in the way that we have said to people, OK, it's fine, you can live in your silo.
I think you're right. I mean,
but no one talks about it.
No one talks about it. I think they've been scared to talk about it. We're starting to talk about it now. I mean, I take a slightly pragmatic view regarding immigration. I think we need immigration because we need people in the NHS and the hospitality sectors, the agricultural sectors, because we're not homegrown enough people to actually do it. So there's a place for it. However, when people come to this country, we have not done enough work. Various governments have not done enough work to ensure that these people integrate with this country. It's fine. Look, Britain has a great reputation for being a tolerant nation, all right? I would not have it any other way, but I think we've gone too far in that direction, and it's not unreasonable to say to people, you come to this country, you abide by the laws of this country, and you need to live in a certain way. And that's not about being racist or being prejudiced, but it's about saying, look, we want you to be here, but you need to be part of it, and you need to understand how this country operates.
100%.
And if you don't like it, let's have a conversation about it, but let's not have a situation where you say, I'm going to go and do this anyway.
Yeah.
And that gets you down into areas of cultural beliefs and society and religion. You come to this country, you abide by the laws of this country. And I always give an example. You know, my mum spent time in the Middle East, and she would go into various buildings. She'd be asked to cover up her arms and her legs and you know, quite happily cover up her head as well. And she would do that out of respect for that nation. But we're not seeing it in reverse, are we?
Not at all.
There you are.
And I am very mindful of that story we did about asylum seekers standing outside a school, you know, which we know about, taking photos of children. It is not due to cultural differences.
No, it's not. It's
police
unacceptable.
Said it is unacceptable. Duncan, thanks for the moment. After the break, we will be doing some more of this morning's stories. Also, after 8 o'clock, I'm going to be joined by Charlie Rowley, who is a Conservative commentator. I'm going to be asking who's had a good week politically, who's had a bad week politically, and also who should have a week off. That is a very good question. This is Weekend Breakfast. Good morning.
for 5 years after the death penalty was abolished in 1965, and in that period, the capital murder rate went up 125%. The incidence of criminals taking firearms on robberies went up something like, I think, 40%. There was a huge rise that proved conclusively that it had been a deterrent.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Welcome back. This is Talk Weekend Breakfast 7:50. I want to draw your attention, if I may, to this article, which is the Sunday Express front page, National Show of Unity over tax disaster. I'm really pleased about this, actually. Farmers across Britain staged a defiant show of unity yesterday to make it clear to Rachel Reeves they will not let her decimate their futures without a fight. Tractors rolled into towns and villages to talk about the devastating inheritance tax changes that are happening to farms. There seems to be this enormous dichotomy between what the reality is, or what the farmers are saying, and what the government is saying, the number of farms that are actually going to be implicated in all of this. And they delivered a petition to number 10 Downing Street, signed by 250,000, a quarter of a million people. Well, joining me now is David Exworth, who's a farmer and deputy president of the Farmers Union. Good morning.
Morning, David.
Lots of our viewers and listeners said they saw your protest yesterday with the tractors, with young farmers who were very depressed about their future, who can see no future for themselves. They're worried the family farm is going to be dissected to pay the inheritance tax the inheritance tax when the farmer actually dies. Can you give us a sense of how the farmers feel?
So what you saw yesterday was, farmers coming out because they're scared. This strikes at the very core of why we do what we do, and it's taken confidence from an industry that was already at record low levels and taken it to a whole new depth. But the real thing about yesterday was it was a day of unity, but it was farmers, there were vets, there were tractor dealers, there were politicians, there were MPs, councillors, there were all kinds of people came out right across the country. And that shows, yes, we've seen tractors in Westminster, but this is farmers right across the country. And that shows the depth and the strength of the feeling. And it's that strong because it matters.
Well, Downing Street says, it doesn't affect many farms. I think Downing Street said it's 550 farms. The NFU says, hang on a minute, it's not, it's 70,000 farms.
Look, everybody gets this. The only place that doesn't get this, I think, is the Treasury. It affects everyone because everybody has to think about how they have to manage with this tax now. So even if you're not liable, you might be. It's undermined confidence. Everybody's looking at, do I invest? Do I carry on? It's damaging food production because it's undermined the confidence of the farmers of this country. And the government have got to change. The message from yesterday is we're not backing down. We're not going anywhere. This has been brought in an unjust way, and they have to change it.
Is part of the problem here that you've got a metropolitan government with people who have no experience, have never been to the countryside as far as I can see? You've got DEFRA being represented by MPs in constituencies like Streatham, that great agricultural belt of the United Kingdom.
Look, I think even people... The message from yesterday, even people in urban centres get it as well. It's not a hard concept to understand that you need your farm to be able to farm. And if you are forced to sell parts to your farm, you can't carry on. It's not difficult. You don't need to live in the countryside to understand that. I think DEFRA understand that. I think, I say the only people that really don't get it now are the Treasury, and they just have to find a way to change their thinking on this. They've got to make a move. They've just got to find a way to do it.
Do you see that happening?
I think they have to. You can see from the strength of feeling, we're not going to wait. This is going to carry on. I suspect they know they've got it wrong, but they just can't find a way to admit they've got it wrong. So that is the challenge now, is how can they find a way out of this? And you can see from yesterday, they need a way out.
I know channels like this one are covering it. I didn't see the coverage on mainstream media that it should have been.
I think it was there. I mean, I saw stories on local TV and radio right across the country.
Good.
I think that was the point about doing a day of unity across the country. It was there in local news and radio. And of course, I saw many MPs outside Long Farms yesterday, but they'll have seen it on their local news. And when they go back to Westminster tomorrow, they'll be talking about it in the House of Parliament about what happened. So actually, that was the purpose of yesterday, to get out and show the feeling in the country, get people talking right across the country, and then that conversation will come back into Westminster.
And of course, the government has to save face here. Is there a way that the NFU have come together, the Countryside Alliance have come together with a roadmap, how government can back down, but without being seen to be backing down? Oh, I think we've lost you, actually, there. Duncan, that was David there, David Exwood, talking about the farmers' strike. Do you think that is the way forward, some sort of roadmap, so the government doesn't look like it's backing down but realises it's made a terrible error?
Well, that's basic politics, isn't it? No politician likes to have to admit to making a mistake or doing a U-turn, because people like you and I pop up here on Talk and just go, oh, look, it's another U-turn. The Countryside Alliance and the National Farmers Union are great organisations. I'm sure if they put their heads together, they could probably provide as you say, a roadmap or blueprint in order to say to the Treasury, look, you know, why don't you look at doing this instead? My gut suggests that feelings regarding this are so high, I think ultimately what we might see is the Treasury being forced to move the limits regarding when the inheritance tax kicks in.
Let's ask David. David, do you see that happening? I know we've got you back. Do you see that happening, the government actually changing the threshold? Is that a way forward?
Yeah, look, they could target this so much better. They said they want to go after rich landowners. They could do that. There's so many ways they could make this better by making a few adjustments. They can keep, you know, they can keep the substantive measure. We recognise this is not about getting rid of it 100%, but what they can do is make some changes to make it work.
Yeah. Really good to talk to you, David. Thank you very much for your time. David Exwood there, farmer and deputy president of the Farmers Union. That's the point, isn't it? What they want is to stop people buying the land, pretending they're a farmer, but not actually farming that land.
Exactly that. So you change the thresholds as to when this inheritance tax kicks in. And you save a bit of face because you're not abolishing the policy completely, are you?
I still think the fact that supermarkets have come out in favour of the farmers is quite significant.
It is, and also you've got to remember a lot of these supermarkets donate heavily to political parties as well, including the Labour Party.
Yes, I'm thinking of one particular supermarket.
Are you now?
Right at the top of my head. But anyway, Duncan, thank you so much for coming.
Always
in.
a pleasure.
It's been a great
Thank you
pleasure
for having me in. See you soon.
Brilliant to see you. Yes, see you soon. Duncan Barks there, broadcaster who's joined me for the last 2 hours. Loads of you getting in touch. This is Mike in Whitney. Hi, David. I totally disagree with Duncan over needing immigration to staff the NHS. Rubbish. If net 740,000 people are coming here annually, many to work in the NHS, surely only over the last 5 years the NHS would have a waiting list for staff, not patients. The question is, of course, whether they want to do those jobs. Good morning, David. The term "we" is too inclusive when talking about the situation we currently face. Many commentators say we have allowed the decline of our country to happen. We have not. The politicians have. It is their legacy, and we now have to clean it up. Shameful that we pay for such deliberate harm. Thank goodness for talkTV. Thank you for your kind words there. Also, Dr. David, the Labour government particularly couldn't care less about integration. All they're interested in is securing the immigrant vote. I'm also minded, actually, the government wants to drop the voting age to 16. Just think about that. The immigration problem goes way back. In the 50s and 60s, there were ghettos forming in places such as Southall and Brixton. We have never encouraged integration. So a current theme there from Jackie. Thank you very much, Jackie, for that. And Gary says London is a separate country. The vast majority of the population elsewhere in the UK have no idea of what is happening. It will be too late when society breaks down. Keep all of those messages coming in. Should we have a closer relationship with Europe instead of the United States? That is what we're being told by an MRP poll. Also, Rachel Reeves says, oh, it's Brexit. Brexit is to blame. Is it? Let me know.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Hello, a very good morning to you just after 8 o'clock on Sunday, January the 26th. I'm David Bull. This is Weekend Breakfast. Thank you for your company. Don't worry, great news awaits. It's Australia Day, the sixth largest country in the world, the land of barbecues, of koalas known as drop bears, I'll tell you why later, and kangaroos. Of course, it celebrates the 1788 landing of the first fleet and the raising of the Union flag at Sydney Cove. Happy as right now. Also, it's International Spouse Day, a day dedicated to recognising your spouse. Yes. You need to acknowledge the commitment that you have made to each other today.
This is my boss, Jonathan.
That ages me. Also, you'll like this one. It's Dental Drill Appreciation Day, a day that celebrates the invention of the electric dental drill by American dentist George Green in 1875. Oh, hooray.
OK, lie back, open wide. There, that didn't hurt, did it?
No, didn't at all. Right, let's move on to today's fascinating facts. Right, here are some acts. Good morning. On this day in 1823, the death of Edward Jenner. Of course, he was the pioneer of the smallpox vaccine. He's sometimes referred to as the father of immunology. It has been said that his work saved more lives than the work of any other man. On this day in 1922 was the birth of a chap called Michael Benteen. Do you remember him? He was a British comedian, comic actor, founding member of the Goon Show radio show with Spike Milligan, Peter Sellers and Harry Seacombe. I grew up with Michael Benteen. I thought he was absolutely fantastic. I think it was potty time. Potty time! On this day in 1982, Conservative Prime Minister Mrs Thatcher was elected. That was in 1979 on the slogan, Labour isn't working. Yet the number of people out of work in Britain rose above 3 million for the first time since the 1930s. On this day in 1986, the Sunday Times and the News of the World were printed at Wapping for the first time as the nation's presses moved away from Fleet Street. And those are today's fascinating facts.
Weekend breakfast, can't start it the wrong way. The David Bull Show, your bright Sunday.
Well, a very good morning to you this morning. I hope you're very well wherever you are waking up around the country. There's so much going on this morning. Rachel Reeves at war with Labour's blockers. This is Rachel Reeves as says she is basically, this is a firing shot at her own party saying do not stand in the way of what we are going to do. We are having our national planning and infrastructure bill going through, which means we can build whatever we want, wherever we want, and local objections will be overruled. I'm paraphrasing here slightly. The environmental lobby has to be curtailed, and also, of course, it brings me or reminds me of the bat shed, if you remember that, to protect the bats. This is over HS2. Now, this is going to be a massive tug of war between Ed Miliband, who is a proponent of net zero at all costs, even though 1% of electricity was generated by wind turbines on one day of last week. And then, of course, you've got Rachel Reeves promoting the economy. The economy comes first. And, of course, we're waiting to hear what she's going to say about a third runway at Heathrow, also about Stansted, maybe Luton. Are they going to expand any other airports as well? The front page of the Sunday Mirror this morning says, I'll deliver for working people. Such a lazy trope, that, working people. She says that she will deliver for working people. This is an exclusive, apparently, and the Mirror very much on side. She says Rachel Reeves is determined to make ordinary folk better off. She's going to smash the obstacles restraining the economy. She will go further and faster. She says the Tories have left a huge mess. By the way, you've been in power quite a long time now. Get on with it. Low growth is not our country's destiny. For 14 years, our growth has been anemic. It has been on the floor. I think it is worth saying that, of course, we had a very bruising start to the new year. Market turmoil, lack of confidence, because, of course, the government have talked down the economy. The value of the pound was hit. Huge criticism to Rachel Reeves. She says the #1 mission is to grow the economy. Not going very well, is it, at the moment? And, of course, your huge tax rises that you are bringing in. This is another big story this morning. So an MRP poll, this is Move Closer to Europe, not Trump. This is voters apparently telling Starmer. Keir Starmer is under growing pressure to forge closer economic links with Europe 5 years on from Brexit. Brexit was 5 years ago on Friday coming, by the way. We still haven't properly Brexited. We've still annexed Northern Ireland, put a border in the Irish Sea. You've got a red lane, a green lane. We haven't taken advantage of our freedoms, even though we have it. Actually, the one freedom we have is to impose VAT. One of the freedoms is to impose VAT on things if we want to. And the Labour government has taken that up, haven't they, on private schools. The MRP survey of almost 15,000 people by YouGov for the Best of Britain think tank shows people in every constituency back closer arrangements with the EU rather than with transatlantic trade with Washington. She also goes further in this, saying Brexit has harmed the UK economy, and she's determined to claw back some of the gross domestic product, or GDP, that we have lost. So I'm asking this morning, do you agree with Rachel Reeves that Brexit has damaged the UK? The number 0344 499 1000. You can text the word talk in your message to 87222. You can message us on X as well at talkTV. Let's talk about the week in politics. Who has had a good week? Who's had a bad week? Who's got a shocking week ahead? And who should have a week off? Charlie Rowley, Conservative commentator, joins me now. Good morning, Charlie.
Good morning. Hello.
Hello, good to see you. Right, I rather like this. I mean, the papers this morning full of politics, whether it's about moving closer to Europe, not to the US. Rachel Reeves on the offensive here. I'm going to deliver for working people. There's another story about Starmer being under threat from the far left. Who do you think's had a good week?
Well, my pick for the person that's had a good week is obviously Donald Trump. No one, I think, has had a better week than him. Obviously, only coming into office on Monday officially, but it feels like he's been there for a couple of years already. The amount of executive orders he's got through and all the decisions that he's made just in the first week of his second term, and I think he's made everybody breathe a sigh of relief. Yes, he's got a way of doing things that might not be the conventional way that you'd expect, but he's flown just in the last 24 hours to Los Angeles and had a public meeting with officials in LA and made it absolutely clear to them and showed them up basically that them saying that they've got to allow people to go back to their homes to clear the debris if they want to. They can't wait for some subcontracted, outsourced government contract to clear it away for them, which will take months and months. And he's really giving it to the mayor of LA. That's just an example in the first week, but tearing up things like the DEI targets and all the rest of it. And obviously we're seeing the continued release of hostages within Israel and from Gaza. A very good week for the new president of the United States.
Yeah, I mean, he's hit the ground running, hasn't he? He said the golden era of America begins now. We will be the envy of every nation. I think what comes across loud and clear from him is it's America first, and that is welcomed by people across America. I think people in Britain are looking at this thinking, why can't we have some of that?
I think that's totally right. And you know what was telling also this week was when he talked to the people, the good people at Davos, looming over them in front of that online screen, basically saying that he was going to impose huge tariffs on the EU because they can allow American cars into the EU market, but not a single car. Sorry, the other way around. Not a single car from the EU seems to me to go into to the US. What he was effectively saying. And by the way, that prompted a response from Ursula von der Leyen to say, we must be prepared to negotiate with Donald Trump. We'll take him seriously and we need to negotiate early. Well, that just signaled to me, what kind of a bad deal have America had under the last administration then? If Ursula von der Leyen, the unelected president, but the president of the EU, is ready to move and is ready to negotiate and take a compromise, it just seems to me that they must have been having a pretty bad deal to begin with. And the Donald has come in to say, I'm putting America first, as you say, and I'm putting those bad deals right.
And he's going to basically reduce the cost of energy. Drill, baby, drill.
He is, yes, a contentious topic amongst people when it comes to net zero. But I think, look, he is prepared to obviously protect jobs. He's prepared to bring energy prices down for the American people. He's prepared to do obviously whatever it takes to make sure that the economy, the US economy, is stable and secure without all of this added cost to consumers, removing the US from the Paris Climate Agreement, where America will be shouldering again the burden of the world, something that he doesn't think is necessary. Other countries can step up and do their bit. But he is, as you say, putting America first.
I mean, it's interesting that the Paris climate change, also the WHO, he said, right, we're pulling out of that. Now this morning he's saying, well, we might go in, but I'm not paying the sort of money I was paying. Where do you stand on the fact that he's also rather overreaching here? Because, of course, he's going to rename the Gulf of Mexico the Gulf of America, and he's got his eyes on Greenland, very upset with Denmark.
Yes, apparently a 45-minute tetchy phone call.
Yes,
with the Danish Prime Minister. Won't be the first, certainly won't be the last. I should imagine of world leaders. But I think, look, I think he is overreaching. But this is the thing: first impressions count. And yes, he's signing all these executive orders, some of which will be challenged through the courts, some of which, we must remember, won't be plain sailing and will be rebuffeted. That's just the nature of the beast. But what he's doing is demonstrating right from the off as any sort of CEO of a company should and would, any good leader should, is to say, this is the direction of travel. This is how optimistic and upbeat we should be about ourselves. This is all the good stuff that I'm doing to make sure that the American citizens and the Americans are protected, and as a country we're protected. And, it set the tone for what should be, even with difficult decisions, a positive 4-year term. Take that in contrast to this government that came into office within its first days, scrapped the roundup plan, got rid of the winter fuel allowance for pensioners, taxed farmers, increased national insurance contributions on businesses, putting people out of work, seeing a flatlined economy. To say that we're making all these difficult decisions, but sunny uplands are now upon us, or we should be taking a bit of Trump optimism, says Rachel from accounts. I mean, the contrast is stark, and that's why people are so fed up already of this Labour government, and why people would much rather see Donald Trump.
So who are you nominating to have had a very bad week?
Well, I'm afraid I think I just mentioned her there, poor Rachel. Not a good week, I don't think. No one will buy the hypocrisy of having, like Keir Starmer, trashed Donald Trump's reputation, criticised him no end. Is now sort of saying on the front page of the Sunday Times, I think it is, that we need a bit of Trump optimism. Well, goodness me, you don't say, Rachel. But that optimism doesn't come when you increase taxes on business when you said you weren't going to do it. When you put people's futures and people's jobs at risk, where people, particularly in the tourist and sector. As well as Sainsbury's, obviously announcing that there might be 3,000 job sort of cuts. People that work in bars, restaurants, those companies aren't taking on new people because it's just too expensive and such a burden to their business. And it is business that we always must remember is the the bedrock and the backbone of our economy. That's these are the people that employ another person, that grow and invest in technology, and couple that with, about up to 10,000, 11,000 millionaires leaving the country. These are the innovators. These are the people that can really afford to invest in Britain. Well, they're taking their business and their money up sticks and elsewhere.
So looking forward to next week, who should we keep an eye on?
Well, I think Nigel Farage next week for lots of different reasons. I think since he's come back from the US, we haven't heard, I don't think, too much from him, but I think this is a week where he can push back on some of the things that have happened in British politics over the last week. So he can really, I think, dominate on the economy, where Rachel's obviously been away, and respond to Rachel in terms of the article that she's suggesting about Trump optimism. I think he can push back against Wes Streeting, that gave a speech yesterday to a Labour, the Fabian Society, which is a Labour wing, a movement traditionally within the Labour Party, where they've had a bit of a row over the NHS, and Nigel making it clear that under a reform government, if ever that to come to pass, and on the back of the polls, you can't rule anything out. But the NHS would be free at the point of delivery. That word delivery being the absolutely crucial word, because obviously if you are needed to be treated in the NHS, you will be treated. But ultimately, if you're actually not from this country, or actually if you do need to pay for some of your services, then you should. It is a national health service, not an international health service. I think that point is very well made, and something that most people, common sense minded people, will absolutely understand and get behind. And I just think there is an interesting vote, I think, that could be coming up in the Commons next week, which is about the WASPy women. These are the women who sort of lost out their pension or had changes to their pension, have been calling for compensation because of that age change and missing out financially. The Labour Party campaigned no end to get them that compensation, no less, the half the cabinet posing with WASPy women and signs to say that they need to get their compensation. Labour totally turned their backs on them. It's called by the SNP. I would like to see what Nigel's view is on that. I think I might be right in saying that he has supported the WASPy women before, but we don't know, or I can't be sure. But I think anything that he can do in those three areas, I think will only increase the support that we're seeing for reform.
And finally, who do you think should have a week off?
Well, there was quite a few that came to mind. Half the cabinet, may as well sort of go and put their feet up. I think we'd do us all a favour. But I think I've come to the conclusion. I think it was Wes Streeting for me. Out of a crowded field, Ed Miliband was up there.
Yeah.
On the back of obviously this idea of the third runway at Heathrow coming down the track. Would he stay? Would he go? I mean, Sadiq Khan, Sir Sadiq, forgive me, opposed to it. Probably about the only thing that we might agree on. But Wes Streeting, I think, because the NHS has now ditched a number of its targets that I think just common sense that it shouldn't be a priority for the NHS, but he's sort of just late to the party at arriving on that. But also, I think this idea that what he was saying at the Fabian Society is that the left and the Fabian Society and the Labour Party needs to take on and tackle this idea of Nigel Farage and this rising populism. I think people still just don't get it. The reason why Reform are doing so well in the polls at the minute is because it's speaking the language of the people. It's articulating the mood of the country, particularly when you have these terrible atrocities, such as the case of Axel Ruda Cabana, where the government had withheld information from the public, which could have prevented some of the riots that you saw in the summer, because the public aren't stupid, David. I mean, I know you would agree with me on that. The public don't get it wrong all that often. And I think that this is just another politician that is blind to the reason why Labour won the big majority that they did on a very low turnout and on a popular vote, less popular than what Jeremy Corbyn got. I think Labour would be better placed, and Wes Streeting and his cabinet colleagues would be better placed at actually understanding the issues of this country, why things like immigration matter, why there shouldn't be a two-tiered criminal system in this country, and get on and tackling those issues rather than just attacking another political figure.
So it's a week off for Wes Streeting. Charlie, always good to talk to you. Thanks very much indeed. Charlie Rowley there, Conservative commentator. So many messages coming in. Do you agree with Rachel Reeves that Brexit has damaged the UK? That's the question I'm asking this morning. Good morning, David. Brexit has not damaged Britain. It's the establishment, it's civil servants, it's Westminster, it's MPs themselves. This is Paul in the Cotswolds. Good morning to you. Parliament did everything they could to stop Brexit. If they'd supported the country, we wouldn't be in the mess we're in. I'm paraphrasing here. Don't blame Brexit just because they didn't like the result of a so-called democratic country. Lots more coming in as well. Good morning, David. This is Claire. There's a problem here. People seem to think the government have made a mistake over the farmers' inheritance tax. Far from it. It's the politics of envy for their slanted ideology of hating Britain and our culture and history. As this shows, because the money created from this tax is deliberately going to farmers overseas. This is also a large-scale land grab for their crazy net zero solar and wind farms. I'm alarmed that the national left-leaning media hasn't brought a spotlight on the farmers' protests. I would agree. But I'm not surprised, so I feel that we as consumers must protest with our pockets and not buy farm produce from abroad. We need to stand for British farmers, just as our supermarkets are. One more. Steve says Brexit has damaged Britain, but not for the reasons you would think. It's because it hasn't been implemented correctly or properly. Keep all of those messages coming in, please. Time for a break. After the break, it's our Future Politics panel this morning. Ben Cope, political writer and commentator, and Jonathan Gibson, political commentator, will be joining me in just a few short minutes. This is Talk.
what would be your position in terms of how we would even begin to think about administrating something like the death penalty? I mean, how would we do it?
I haven't got the answer to that, Mike, but I do think that there's reasons now to have a serious national debate for reintroducing the death penalty in exceptional circumstances. And I think this is an exceptional circumstance. So I would listen to all the arguments and then make a decision. And I think that's how good government should work.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Welcome back. Weekend Breakfast, day 26, Sunday, January the 26th. So many of you getting in touch. It's brilliant. Darren has sent a voice note from sunny Suffolk. Good morning.
Morning, David. Great show. Your guest talks about the need for people to come into the country to work in places like the NHS. But if we hadn't put ludicrous caps on doctors and nurses actually attending the actual colleges to learn their trade, we wouldn't need people from abroad. Think about that for a minute. I also think the next thing that Reform should do is let the pensioners, the winter fuel pensioners, join their membership for free or £1 to double that ticket overnight.
Ooh, that's really interesting. Thank you for that. Another voice note now from Christopher. Good morning.
Good morning, David. Enjoying listening to you. That chap from Newcastle you had on earlier, I voiced message, absolutely correct. What was Gates doing with Starmer at number 10 in his fireside chat? Don't forget, the other guy that was with them was Larry Fink, CEO of BlackRock. The inheritance tax on farmers is nothing more than a land grab to give Mad Ed Miliband his land to put his solar farms. It's absolutely ridiculous. The other coincidence that they are not talking about is this: we should be closer to Europe. Funny how that comes out just as a week after they announced that it's Ollie Robbins that did such a crap job of doing Brexit that they've sent him there to Europe to negotiate our new agreements with them. What a joke. Have a good day.
Well said, Christopher. What a joke. So many other messages coming in. Good morning, David. This is Pat in Chichester. Good morning to you, Pat. Thank you for a great show. That's very kind. Thank you. It is really refreshing to hear you refer to our national flag as the Union flag, which, of course, it is. Calling it the Union Jack is only to be used when in relation to the Royal Navy. Thank you very much. That sort of thing really annoys me, actually. That's why I call it the Union flag. Good morning, David. David Exwood of the Farmers Union got it absolutely right when he said all farmers are affected because they have all been made to worry more about the financial affairs of their farms. As one of the pensioners also under attack from our own government, it's the same for us. We're now all worried about what this government may do next to reduce our incomes. And we're on one hand also less able to do anything about it. So I think that's a really good point, actually. Everyone worried about what the government's going to do next. David, the government needed the Muslim vote, but by the next one, they will not get it. As the Muslims voting Labour, they'll be voting for their own candidates they're going to be putting up, as they now feel they're stronger as Muslim voters, and they'll have started a new party in the next 4 years. One more, Jeff in Huntley in Aberdeenshire. Good morning to you. It's the mismanagement of Brexit that has messed all of this up. They didn't take advantage of Brexit itself. Keep all of those messages coming in. Do you agree with Rachel Reeves that Brexit has damaged the UK? Also, should we move closer to Europe and away from Donald Trump? Let me know your thoughts on all of that. 0344 499 1000. Now, though, it's time for the Future Politics panel.
The Future Politics panel.
Well, joining me this morning, I'm delighted to say, Ben Cope, political writer and commentator, and Jonathan Gibson, political commentator. Boys in Blue, good morning.
Good morning, David.
How are you both?
We're good,
well.
we're good.
Good. Shall we start with Rachel Reeves? I mean, so Charlie Rowley says she's had a terrible week, and I pretty much agree with that. The Sunday Telegraph this morning, Reeves at war with Labour's blockers. This is really interesting. Rachel Reeves says she's not going to tolerate blockers in her own party standing in the way of plans for growth. This is the Planning and Infrastructure Bill that's coming in. This is basically her lobbing a grenade at her own side, saying, don't you dare derail me. We've meanwhile got Ed Mad Miliband and his quest for net zero and sticking windmills everywhere for no apparent reason, even though they generated 1% of electricity last week. And then she's now saying the economy is paramount. She knows she's in trouble.
I think she does. I think she was probably sort of slightly less sort of out to dry with her budget. I think it was like way too much of the government's entire agenda was sort of pinned on her. I think it was then disappointing, and then after that we've seen the repercussions. So she's clearly trying to sort of not only sort of pivot the Treasury, but pivot I think the entire government towards a growth agenda. And for me, I think that's an excellent thing. I think it was disappointing that the Conservatives sort of failed to grasp that while in government. So at least in communication, she's clearly doing that. Let's hope she delivers.
And how do you see that fractious relationship with Miliband? Who's going to win that?
I really hope Rachel Reeves does. I mean, at the moment, Miliband's obviously got a sort of pretty militant line towards sort of energy by 2030, and I think I think towards given that the Parliament will sort of stretch towards that, I think people will realise that it is an unrealistic target by then. So I'm hoping that just sort of common sense prevails under Keir Starmer.
So the devil is in the detail here, because of course what she's also got in her hands is her own constituency MPs. So she is rightly saying we need to build more houses, 1.5 million over 5 years, which is exactly the same as the previous target. She says the default is yes, and we're going to reduce the environmental lobbies. There's another really interesting point here, which is the provision of housing around train stations. Whilst I can understand that being a great idea, I wonder how communities are going to react to that.
Well, I think it's absolutely vital and something we've massively failed on over the last 50 years, which is effective infrastructure development in these areas. And we've had not just environmental lobbies, but people who care about the view or, the fact that there's a single oak tree in the middle of a field, essentially blocking massive development, which is really, really harming opportunities for young people to get onto the property ladder, to have that sort of security. And it's something that Rachel Reeves, I really hope, can push through with it, because, again, you do see significant hurdles and obstacles from people who don't want disruption to their own community or house building, when actually for Britain and for Britain to be a great country, it's absolutely vital that we create this space.
So she also says, I'm going to deliver for working people. I've heard this so many times.
What is working people?
What
it's the most generic thing ever, and we know that it's a political phrase for nonsense.
But do you think that turns voters off when they hear working people?
I just think it's a bit of an eye roll, like it doesn't really mean anything. It's one of those standard trot-out political phrases to incorporate a whole group and not alienate anyone, but thereby not really bring anyone into the political
I mean, it's so interesting. She says, I'm ambitious for growth in Britain. For 14 years, our growth has been anemic. It has been on the floor, pointing to the previous government. She also, and I think this is quite important, is talks about the environmental, all these lobby groups. I read this story this morning. There's been a decade-long study into the habits of an endangered species of snails. It has been holding up vital road improvements at a black spot. It was meant to take 3 years. It has taken 10 years. They are no closer to deciding what to do with said snails. And this is, I think this is in Suffolk, in northwest Norfolk, actually. You do have to say, what the heck are you doing? Like HS2, for example, and the bat shed, which cost, what, 100 million quid or thereabouts. So is Reeves on the right track here?
I think she totally is. I think there are a lot of elements here. One, I think she's right that we do just need to be able to, the central government needs to be able to push things through where possible. I also think we need to change the incentive structures here, whereby at the moment local communities, have every incentive to block things because they don't at least sort of immediately receive the economic benefit of development. So I think if we can try and whether it's through the new kind of like slightly like federalist structures they're trying to bring out with different mayoralties, for example, if there can be like fiscal incentive for communities to build, I think that's useful. I also think blockers should face, like when they bring things to court, should face some kind of financial jeopardy. Should
they?
I think if you bring something to court and you failed...
What about if the government says we're going to shove a pylon in your garden?
People are using
well, then
it as a tool.
Well, then the government would lose, and then the person wouldn't. But if you're, bringing studies about snails, it's costing the country millions and millions, then I think that there should be some financial cost for doing so.
I mean, that is extraordinary.
It's more than just that. It is extraordinary, absolutely. But, someone thinks that the view is not so nice, and so they know that they take it to court, and they'll probably push everything back another 5 years into the developer thinks, is it really worth it? A 5-year fight in court, lots of money being spent, and it's just really, really difficult, and it increases the layers of bureaucracy.
What about having a third runway at Heathrow, expanding Luton and Gatwick? Are you in favour?
As in, I haven't looked enough in detail at the specifics of the case, but broadly it's something that I would support. But I think the main thing that we need to support is the housing and the infrastructure within cities, within development. Only 2% of the UK is urbanised. There is lots of room for development, and the planning structures.
Infrastructure as well, and you need doctors' surgeries and supermarkets. And this is the thing that the government never seems to get right, as far as I can see.
It's something that I think both governments have massively failed on over the last 50 years or so. There's been big failings to deliver promises on both sides. It is something that's really difficult. You've seen particularly richer constituencies blocking it because it decreases the value of their land. We saw that with HS2, particularly wealthier Conservative constituencies made an effort to force the development to be dug underground, which harmed and massively increased the cost of the project.
Yep.
And so I think there needs to be a radical reshaping in terms of how we approach this sort of problem.
It's fascinating to me. It seems to me that the government has no strategic plan. So you've got different departments all going in different directions. Rachel Reeves just back from Davos now suddenly reaches for low-hanging fruit, third runway at Heathrow. Your thoughts on that?
I entirely agree. I mean, there was I think it was a Tim Shipman piece from 2 or 3 months ago when he said Starmer supposedly was very frustrated when he entered Downing Street and realised that no one had developed a plan, and obviously sort of not realising that would primarily be his own responsibility. And I think ultimately we're living out that failure to provide any vision. I think in some ways it's sort of slightly unfair that Reeves is sort of feeling the need to step up and do this, but yeah, it definitely puts her into conflict with other departments.
Yeah. I was going to say, I also think there's something to be said for the narrative, because narrative economics is a thing. When you talk down the economy or you talk up the economy, it actually has an effect.
So they're complicit in that?
Well, I think at the start they spent way too long talking it down and being caution whilst not implementing the budget. I think that was a mistake.
But also, wasn't the issue that they had this impasse, this void of information, because the minute they got into power, then there was that huge passage of time, wasn't there?
Yeah.
Until there was actually a budget. So no one knew what to do.
So I think now it's better that they're talking up the economy, they're talking about plans for growth, because hopefully that will increase confidence.
So the bit I don't understand, she is the only person saying there'll be 6 interest rate cuts this year.
Mm-hmm.
Who's right? The economist or Rachel from who is the economist?
I mean, I'm sure Rachel will have the final say, or the government will have the final say in dictating what sort of... Yeah, but I guess the interest rates will depend on government policy. We know that if you carry out certain economic policies, that will lead to certain movements on interest rates, but obviously the Bank of England has the final say.
And just finally, the lack of confidence from business saying we're not investing, we're not getting involved. Look at the housing market. I'm particularly noticing the capital at the moment, which has normally always been thriving. The housing market is literally in the toilet in London.
Yeah, I mean, so I think a broadly lack of trust from business. I think while there was the big black hole they supposedly needed to fill the budget, I think that choosing employer national insurance was that is clearly an anti-growth measure. So I think if Reeves is going to pivot towards growth, I think she might need to.
So should she ditch that employer national insurance?
Yeah, I think she should find money somewhere else.
Would she?
I don't think she will, but she should.
OK, chaps, I have to go to a break. Stay where you are. We'll continue with our Future Politics panel after this break.
across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Welcome back. This is Talk 8:41, Sunday, January the 26th. We're in the middle of Future Politics panel with Ben Cope, political writer and commentator, and Jonathan Gibson, who's a political commentator. This is really interesting. I've been talking about it this morning, actually. Pressure is growing on Labour to improve the trade deal with the EU. Keir Starmer under growing pressure to forge closer economic links with Europe. 5 years on from Brexit. Brexit happened, amazingly, 5 years ago, this Friday coming. So this is a poll, an MRP survey of almost 15,000 people by YouGov for Best of Britain think tank, shows more people in every constituency back closer arrangements with the EU rather than more transatlantic trade with Washington. Rachel Reeves was then asked by The Observer about Brexit. She says that Brexit has harmed the UK economy. Jonathan.
Yes, I think the UK economy has certainly been harmed
what you were going to say?
Economy, believe it or not. But I think you can look at the statistics as well. It's not really an opinion at this point. The UK economy is estimated to be £5.5 billion smaller than it would have been if we'd have remained. The trade's massively decreased by 27 billion. The employment, there's 1.8 million fewer jobs. The cost of living's higher. It's approximately £210 more expensive for a basket of food. So it depends what you are.
Also, hang on, here's what I would throw back at you and what our viewers will be throwing back at you. We haven't Brexited. We haven't taken advantage.
Well, we didn't have a referendum on exactly what type of Brexit we wanted. That was part of the issue.
What do you want? A full fat one or semi-skimmed?
Exactly. That was not a choice, you know. I like mine semi-skimmed, but some other people might want it.
Isn't the issue here actually that we have put in place the building blocks of it, but actually it was because the civil service didn't want to do it and the governments didn't want to do it. Theresa May didn't want to do it. Dave, call me Dave, legged it the minute he lost, and there was nothing left.
I mean, David Cameron left because he didn't want to do it. That was the whole point. But I think with bureaucracy...
But he called the referendum.
Yes, he did.
That's
and then he
what's
resigned.
so terrible about the whole thing.
Well, he thought he'd win, didn't he?
He did,
you know, they were probably quite glad that he called the referendum, I'm guessing. Right. Reform definitely were very happy, and they were the part of the people, or Brexit parties it was, which pushed the Conservative Party to do this. But bureaucratically, it's very, very difficult to implement such a big piece of legislation with such radical changes to our infrastructure and system. So there is significant time lags and significant hurdles, and that's just part of what it means to have a civil service, to have an infrastructure around law.
But of course, we annexed Northern Ireland. Northern Ireland, we got this ridiculous system of red and green lanes. We actually have signed trade agreements with various parts of the various other countries as well. We also have tariff-free access to the EU as well. Where do you stand on this? What is behind this headline? Is what I'm getting at. Why is she saying this now?
Yeah, I mean, at least for me, I feel like if as we were talking about earlier, as Reeves is pivoting towards growth, I think this is a fundamental part of that. I think, you know, as Jonathan was saying, I don't think there's any argument that at least the kind of Brexit we have had has significantly harmed growth. You know, you can. I think the only argument for how Brexit could have potentially helped the economy is if you take the more kind of Singapore libertarian model. I'm not sure like anything else. But then I think that is a very unpopular view among British voters.
No, it isn't. It's an unpopular view amongst civil servants.
I'm not sure that's true.
Isn't it?
I don't think that's true.
Okay.
I think generally there's over the last 15 years there's been a massive swing towards kind of interventionist government where people expect the state to step in at any point. I'm not sure, you know, that kind of...
What, and the price of that? Whopping great taxes. You think people are in favour of that?
It's not necessarily through taxes, but if you look at the rise of whatever you want to call it, populism is the word people often use, but, you know, Trump, Orban, exactly, none of them are free marketeers. The tariff that Trump imposed, which I think is probably one of the key reasons why the UK is looking maybe more towards Brexit, because that's estimated to harm the UK economy by about 4.5% potentially.
Duncan's point about having cake and eating said cake. So you have good relationships with Europe and the United States.
That's the ideal. That is what we want, but I think that's why we're also working really hard on a relationship with the EU, which is maybe something we've been struggling with in recent years.
Interesting. Two sensible young men on your politics panel this morning. Great show again.
Wow. I never get that.
Are you watching something else? Lots of other messages coming in. No, I don't believe that Brexit has damaged Britain. The last government damaged Brexit by not doing a good enough job, mainly because there was little support or enthusiasm for carrying it out, and not finishing the job by not being more robust with our needs and prosperity. It's interesting, actually. Even Nigel Farage, I saw him on Question Time, and they pushed him on Brexit, and he just went, "It's done. It's done. We voted. It's done." And I thought that was quite an interesting comment. I didn't expect him to say that.
Sure, but I guess that's probably because he doesn't want the evaluation side of it, which is that it's been an unmitigated disaster.
No, the implementation of said Brexit has been an unmitigated disaster, I think.
Well, it depends how you define what Brexit was. If Brexit is
taking back control of our money, laws and borders. I said it enough.
Okay, but we said that's a phrase, and we all know that. If you're talking about the actual specifics, there's certain things Brexit would do which would reduce free trade, for example, with the European Union, which is our main trading partner. That is going to have an adverse impact.
But European trade is declining. The trade with the rest of the world is increasing.
Sure, but as a sum of the total trade, it's still the biggest proportion of our trade. You know, the CPTPP trade deal, which I support. You know, I think it's a good thing.
It is a good thing.
Far smaller proportion of trade. Maybe in 50 years' time that will change. I don't know. We'll have to see. But at the moment, Europe is a significant trading partner who we simply can't neglect at these troublesome times.
Let's just put you on the spot, Ben. If you were Rachel Reeves, what would you do at this point with regards to Brexit?
I think, I think I'd do what she's doing, sort of subtly try to create sort of slightly closer trading relationships to boost growth where possible. But I think if they want to actually revisit a proper sort of formal relationship, do it in the second term.
OK, Ben and Jonathan, we'll take a break. We'll continue with our... No
longer going to be popular with your viewers.
Well, no.
Sorry.
No, oh, what terrible... Who are these twins? Same shirt, same glasses, same look and same views, says Tony. Well, there you are. We'll continue with our Future Politics panel after this break.
What would be your position in terms of how we would even begin to think about administrating something like the death penalty? I mean, how would we do it?
I haven't got the answer to that, Mike, but I do think that there's reasons now to have a serious national debate for reintroducing the death penalty in exceptional circumstances. And I think this is an exceptional circumstance. So I would listen to all the arguments and then make a decision. And I think that's how good government should work.
across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Good morning, this is Talk. Right, I'm in the middle of this Future Politics panel with Ben Cope and with Jonathan Gibson. Ian from Merseyside, good morning to you. Now, I listen to your show every weekend. Now, whilst listening to your Future Politics panel, I nearly believed I was at a North London dinner party. Great show, thank you very much. This one is Dale from Halifax, putting both of you right on Brexit. Brexit came along, then COVID came along, so Brexit was put on the back burner. Great show, thank you very much. Our energy policy has done more to harm our economy than any other factor. That is Barry, thank you for that. And this one, which is very close to my heart, Doug in Whittam. David, East Anglia is going to disappear under pylons, wind farms, solar panels, battery storage sites. Add to that the thousands of houses planned. Farmland will be stolen, Greenbelt will be put on. No infrastructure built. It's all short-term planning. Keep all of that coming in. And one more, Claire. Good morning, David. Good morning to you. No, I don't believe that Brexit has damaged Britain. The last government damaged Brexit by not doing a good job. Right. Now, I want to move on to give you a test this morning, okay, which will fill you with dread. Now, my Italian producer took a test. She wanted to become a UK citizen, goodness knows why. Last week, she passed the test, I'm very pleased to say. So you have to do this test, okay? And I'm going to give you the test. That you have to do 24 questions. We're going to do 10. You have to answer 75% to pass. It costs £1,640 to do this test, by the way. You have to also do an English language test. Right, OK, I'm going to ask you this question.
Can I do the English language test first?
No, you passed that one. Quite well. Okay. Quite well. The first question is, what is the minimum age you can drive a car or motorcycle in the UK? Is it 17? Is it 21? Is it 18? Or is it 25?
17.
Yeah, 17.
Yes. What is it?
Well, my brother's doing it.
Oh, very good. Yeah, very good. Oh, very good. Look at that. We've got a ding. Is the statement below true or false? Members of the public are allowed to attend youth court hearings. True or false?
Youth court hearings.
It's so funny. This is to be a UK citizen, and UK citizens don't know.
So I'd go false, but I don't know.
Would you?
I'll go true.
Right, it's false.
It's youth.
Youth. Which of the following statements is correct? Is it A, the Anglo-Saxon kingdoms in England united under King Alfred the Great, or the Anglo-Saxon kingdoms in England united under King Kenneth MacAlpin?
Alfred the Great.
Alfred the Great.
Alfred the Great. Well done, chaps. Which of the following statements is correct? The Reform Act of 1832 reduced the number of people who had the right to vote. Or the Reform Act of 1832 increased the number of people who had the right to vote.
Allowed the middle class to vote. That was
increase, yeah.
Increase, both right. Which of the following statements is correct? By the middle of the 17th century, I mean, how difficult are these? By the middle of the 17th century, the last Welsh rebellions had been defeated. Or, by the middle of the 15th century, the last Welsh rebellions had been defeated.
No, I'd go 17th.
I'd go 17th as well.
15th. Both wrong. Is it? Yeah. For approximately how many years were the Romans in Britain? Were they there for 50 years, 100 years, 400 years, or 600 years?
About 400.
Yeah,
Probably right.
Yeah.
400. Well done. Is the statement true or false? The Channel Islands are part of the United Kingdom. True or false?
True. Wait. Hold on. No, sorry. They're not.
No. Right. Who invaded England in 1066? Was it Richard the Lionheart, King Canute, William the Duke of Normandy, or Harold of Wessex?
That was
William.
Normandy, yeah.
Well done. Very good, yeah. After the Bill of Rights was passed in 1689, which two political groups emerged? Was it Labour and the Tories, A, B, Whigs and the Tories, C, Whigs and Nationalists, D, Nationalists and Tories?
No, that's the Whigs and the Tories.
Oh,
yeah.
Top banana. Well, yeah. What he said. And finally, which two religions celebrate Diwali? Is it Hindus and Christians, Hindus and Sikhs, Christians and Sikhs, Buddhists and Christians?
Is that Hindus and Sikhs?
Both correct. Well done. You pass, and you can now remain in the United Kingdom. And it's difficult, isn't it?
Not easy.
Yeah, it's not easy. It's
not easy at all. I found that absolutely extraordinary, actually. Well done. I'm very impressed with both of you. I wonder if I could just do... there was something else that I wanted to do, which was about dress code on airlines. Spirit Airlines basically has banned people from wearing certain things. And this is... Oh, here we are. So this is Spirit Airlines has introduced a new passenger dress code. So they basically have said they have updated their contract of carriage for passengers, updating its dress code. So a guest should not be permitted to board the aircraft if they're barefoot, inadequately clothed. You cannot wear see-through clothing, exposed breasts, buttocks or other private parts, lewd, obscene or offensive clothing or tattoos. Have you seen some shocking behaviour on aircraft?
Not anything like that. That feels like a fairly low bar, to be honest. It's quite disappointed they feel the need to say that.
Yeah, I would agree, but I have seen people who really have forgotten that they're in a public place.
Oh, it's unbelievable. You don't need entertainment, you don't need a book or whatever. Sometimes you can just look at these aisles and people with their massive suitcases, which somehow they manage to get on as hand luggage, and they're arguing and switching places. Oh, it's ridiculous.
Brilliant, lovely. Thank you very much to both of you, of course, to Ben Cope and also Jonathan Gibson. That was today's Future Politics panel. Right, let's move on. Lots of other messages coming in. David, this is Alan in Merseyside. One of our regulars. The EU has tried every which way they could to make life harder for the United Kingdom, so why should we want to be closer to them when they are a vindictive organisation? Great show again, David. This is Diane Shakespeare. Good morning to you. David, you're the only reason I get up early on a Sunday. Thank you. That's very kind. Future Politics panel look like twins. Hair, colour, glasses, shirts, etc. They didn't talk to each other before they came on. Good morning, Dr. David. This disgraceful government wants the farmland mainly for housing, as well as Ed Silly bans solar and wind farms. Just asking this morning, this front page of The Observer, move closer to Europe, not Trump, voters tell Starmer. Would you agree with that? This is the MRP poll that has been carried out, 15,000 people by YouGov for the Best of Britain think tank, shows people in every constituency back closer arrangements with the EU rather than transatlantic trade with Washington. Even in Nigel Farage's seat of Clacton, more people think the UK is better off trading more with its neighbours on the continent than with the US under the Reform UK's leader's ally, Donald Trump. She goes further to say Brexit has harmed the UK economy and she is determined to claw back some of the lost GDP as a result of that decision. Let me know your thoughts on all of that, please. 0344 499 1000. You can text the word talk in your message to 87222. You can also message us on X at talkTV. Let's have a look at some of the other messages that are coming in. Jeff in Huntley in Aberdeenshire. David, it is the mismanagement of Brexit that has messed the whole of this up. They didn't take advantage of anything. Lots of other messages coming in. Sean in Gloucester. How can Brexit be to blame for anything? We haven't done it properly, for one. And secondly, all the Remainer politicians did their best to stop it and deliberately derailed it so it would fail. Chief cheerleader of the disruption was Starmer and his lefty cronies who wanted to defy the democratic, in capital letters, vote of the people. Massive indication of his character even back then. So there you go. Morning, David. Australia has been hijacked by the left, and in many places Australia Day is either renamed or not celebrated. That is Dean in Dagenham. After the break, it's Sunday Surgery. Don't go anywhere.
across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Hello, a very good morning to you. Just after 9 o'clock on Sunday, January the 26th. I'm David Bull. This is Weekend Breakfast. How are you this morning? Well, look, I've got great news for you because happy Australia Day. Yes, the 6th largest country in the world, the land of barbecues, koalas. Oh, by the way, they're called drop bears. And kangaroos. It celebrates the 1788 landing of the First Fleet and raising of the Union flag at Sydney Cove. Happy Australia Day. Oh, good old Kylie. It's International Spouse Day, a day dedicated to recognising your spouse, acknowledging the commitment that you have made to each other.
Mr. and Mrs. Be nice to each other.
They don't make television like that anymore, do they, Mr. and Mrs.? I remember that, 1970s or thereabout. Also, it's Dental Drill Appreciation Day. That's right, a day where we celebrate the invention of the electric dental drill by American dentist George Green. Yes, that happened in 1875. Hooray!
OK, lie back, open wide. There, that didn't hurt, did it?
No,
I
it didn't hurt.
Call an ambulance, nurse.
That's how I feel as they approach with that electric drill. Like, yes, this won't hurt. Yes, it will. Right, let's move on to today's fascinating facts.
Today's fascinating facts.
So some new ones for you this hour. On this day in 1994, a protester fired 2 blank shots from a starting pistol at Prince Charles, who was then Prince of Wales, as he prepared to speak at an Australia Day rally in Sydney. Of course, it's Australia Day today. On this day in 2014, and this is true, police stopped a learner driver for speeding on the M62 in West Yorkshire. Learner driver. She was accompanied, the person overseeing her learning driving was a pet parrot. Since pet parrots are not allowed to supervise learner drivers, her vehicle has been seized, according to police, as they tweeted that. And then on this day, as I said, it's Australia Day. On this day in 2015, Australian Prime Minister Tony Abbott used the country's National Day to announce a knighthood for Prince Philip, the Duke of Edinburgh, for his long life of service and dedication. And those are today's fascinating facts.
Waking up to the sound of the beat, David Bull on the radio can't be beat. From 6 to 10, life feels complete.
Well, good. Well, that was rather brilliant. I was asked earlier, are those jingles actually AI? And the answer to your question is yes, they are. So there you go. Lots of messages coming in. I'm just looking for the headlines this morning, but essentially Rachel Reeves is very much on the offensive this morning. Oh, here we go. Rachel Reeves is on the offensive. She's at war with Labour's blockers. She's saying this is the planning infrastructure bill. She's basically firing a warning shot to her own side, saying do not derail this. She's also going to proclaim on the airport expansion of Heathrow, the 3rd runway, Luton, Gatwick. We believe that is going to happen on Wednesday. She's going to give a speech about that. And then this other big story this morning, The Observer, move closer to Europe, not Trump, voters tell Starmer. This is an MRP poll of 15,000 people. I'd love to know where those 15,000 came from. That's not what I'm hearing. Anyway, they say that even in Nigel Farage's seat of Clacton, more people think the UK is better off trading with the EU. So what do you think about all of that? Do you agree with Rachel Reeves that Brexit has damaged the UK? That is what she says in the copy. And also, should we move closer to Europe and not Donald Trump? The number 0344 499 1000. Calls charged at the national rate. Let's take a couple of voice notes. Claire first on farmers. Good morning, Claire.
Morning, David. There's a problem here. People seem to think that the government have made a mistake over the farmers' inheritance tax. Far from it. It's a politics of envy for their slanted ideology of hating Britain and our culture and history. And this shows because the money created from this tax is going deliberately to farmers overseas. This is also a large-scale land grab for their crazy net zero solar and wind farms. I'm alarmed that the national left-leaning media has not brought a spotlight on the farmers' protests more, but not surprised. So I feel that we as consumers must protest with our pockets and not buy foreign farm produce and, protest as the supermarkets are. Thank you.
No, thank you very much for that, and that's why it was really important for me to discuss this topic this morning, which we did earlier on about the farmers' protests, which we did. It's interesting, isn't it, that we don't get so much coverage from mainstream or other mainstream media. David Exwood joined me at about 7:45 this morning to talk about the plight of the farmers. He's a farmer and deputy president of the Farmers Union. Let's take another voice note. Jacqueline, good morning.
Morning, David. Great show as usual. I don't think anyone should be fooled by Rachel Reeves. I think she's putting herself up for a leadership bid because she knows she's going to be ousted. And I think she knows that Keir Starmer's going to be ousted, so she wants to be on the right side of history, because it's funny, they all seem to know what we want when it comes to getting our vote.
Isn't it funny? Isn't it funny? Well, the way they get the vote is not actually telling you what they're going to do, because they didn't know what they were going to do, but they said they wouldn't do certain things like the agricultural property relief for the farmers, and then the minute they're in, they do exactly that. The stuff they said they wouldn't do. Waspy women, there's another example. Keep your thoughts coming in, please, 0344 499 1000, but now it's time for Sunday Surgery.
Dr. David Bull's Sunday Surgery.
Well, this morning I thought we should talk about ADHD. It seems to be bandied around a great deal. Oh, I've got ADHD and therefore I have to have certain things given to me. It's amazing. And this is a huge story. Thousands of people, wait for this, with self-diagnosed mental health conditions are using a £69,000 a year disability benefit scheme following a rise in advice from ADHD sickfluencers. A sickfluencer is someone who may have been diagnosed or diagnosed themselves with ADHD, taking to the internet, telling people how to get benefits from the government. This is the Access to Work scheme. It can hand claimants nearly £70,000 a year, your money, for equipment and support, including work coaches, noise-cancelling headphones, Apple smartwatches. It surged to 258 million in the last financial year, up 40% from 2022 and 2023. And rightly, the Department of Work and Pensions is alarmed at what is going on. Jess and James, former psychiatric nurse, joins me this morning. Good morning.
Good morning. How you doing?
Really good to see you.
You too.
Look, when I was training 100 years ago, ADHD wasn't around.
Yes.
It just wasn't diagnosed. And for me, my understanding of ADHD is it's this classic triad of hyperactivity, inattention, inappropriate behaviour. It just seems to me that it has ballooned in the numbers of people who say they have ADHD.
Absolutely. Well, much like yourself, when I was nursing, it wasn't around, in my opinion. I mean, they mentioned it in kids. In fact, when I was a child...
In kids,
yeah,
yes.
my mum brought me to the GP because I was hyperactive. And fortunately for me, the GP said, would you rather your son was mute and sat in the corner or actually active? And that ended that conversation. And, well, it's debatable whether I'm okay or not, but I'm okay now.
You seem okay.
I'm okay, yeah. But it is a trend that's coming more apparent, and the reason for that is the human brain wants to do two things, in my opinion. Number one, it wants to attach meaning to everything. We want to understand, why am I like this? Why can't I focus, or why do I super focus, or what is it that I do? And secondly, it wants to keep us safe. So when we're unable to do something, rather than like start a business, go to work, whatever it might be, it's much easier to pin that on something. Therefore, we have meaning attached to it, and it's not my fault. So we're passing the buck, really.
My biggest concern about all of this, and we'll talk more about ADHD generally, is the idea that you can self-diagnose and you can say, well, I've got ADHD. I've seen this myself with young people who then get extra time in exams at school, for example. We're normalising disease behaviour, as it's called.
Oh, 100%. And when did it become okay, David, for people to suddenly self-diagnose and say that because I've took a quiz on the internet or something of the sort, I've clearly got
Dr.
ADHD.
Google.
Well, here we go. I've got ADHD, therefore I must be unwell, so I need to get help with that.
I just want to talk about these sickfluencers. I hadn't heard of these. One user, Madeleine Alexander Grout, claims to have received tens of thousands of pounds from the scheme in the last 2 years to run her businesses. She says, oh, she's got 70,000 followers on TikTok. She has got ADHD, allegedly. She claimed £56,000 in 1 year. She said, oh, well, I need the money because I'm running business. No, what? This is our money.
I actually watched her video.
Oh, did you?
I watched the video. She runs two businesses.
Right.
Now, if you've got ADHD, we're doing a pretty good job running two businesses.
Yes, I thought the whole thing was you were inattentive, and so therefore you can't run a business.
Well, this is it. Well, you're either inattentive hyper-focused or combined.
Right.
There's three ways you can have ADHD, but I don't see why she had to claim all this money for it.
OK, so the number of school children receiving help for special needs is growing faster in Britain than any other major European economy. ADHD skyrocketing, 40% increase in the number of kids from preschool to secondary receiving official support in England, Scotland and Wales. That's faster than Germany, France, Italy and Spain. Let's just talk about ADHD. There is no doubt there is a subsection of people who suffer from ADHD. Do you just want to explain to people, to parents, what that looks like?
Yeah, so look, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, as it's called. As with any mental condition, there are levels. So there's levels of severity, so to speak. I think the blessing and the curse is awareness nowadays. We've been given so much awareness over certain things that we now choose to take labels and amplify them. So if your child meets any of the criteria that's listed on the checklist, so to speak, suddenly, that's it, my child's got ADHD, they need support, they need help. And thoughts become things. When you look at something and you tend to see signs in a child, you tend to pick up on it. Your reticular activating system's going off and you're going, right, oh, that's it, yep, they've got ADHD. But prior to that, you didn't know. And so everything was fine. But again, back to what I was saying earlier on, we're always looking for meaning and attaching stuff. So sometimes parents, look, I'm a parent as well, we're proud of our children. We don't want them to not do well. So if there's a reason for us to hang an excuse on why they're not performing in a certain way, we might take that.
Yeah, and as I said, so just to outline for us, and I said this is what I was taught, it's this classic triad of hyperactivity, inattention, hyperactivity, inattention, and inappropriate behaviour, and we've seen that. So can you just give us some examples of sort of classic ADHD? How might they manifest, particularly maybe in the classroom?
Yeah, OK, so first and foremost, there are also signs of ADHD are actually mimicking, the signs of ADHD can mimic other illnesses such as anxiety, depression, learning disabilities, all this kind of stuff. So it doesn't mean automatically because someone's behaving with the symptoms that they have ADHD. So classic signs of extreme ADHD are, if I was sitting with you right now and I just literally couldn't sit still and I was bouncing all over the place and you were talking to me but I'm looking over here and it's very clear to see that this person has an issue with their focus and their concentration. Now, as a child, that can affect you with a multitude of things. And as an adult, obviously, it can affect you as a multitude of work environments or whatever it is. However, if your symptoms are, for me, for example, I'm sitting here with you right now, we're human beings, we're having thousands of thoughts every second, there's lots of stuff going through our brains. If I have a fleeting thought, does that mean I've got ADHD? No, I'm still looking at you right now, I'm talking to you.
You're thinking about lunch.
Yeah, of course I am, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so it's not always a problem, but I think, again, we take the symptoms and it's much easier for us to live up to labels than it is to actually look into, well, OK, we are living in a distraction pandemic. It's so easy to get distracted these days. Could it be the screens? I mean, you mentioned earlier on they're giving these people smartwatches. You give them another device to get distracted. Well, how does that help ADHD? It doesn't make any sense.
It doesn't. And just in terms of that, I mean, boys particularly it's part of growing up that boys have a lack of attention span. That's what boys do. Yeah. Boys also tend to be very disruptive. Yes. I mean, this is very sexist, but they do tend to be disruptive.
It's true, though. Is it sexist? I don't know. For me, I think it's true. I think, look, at the end of the day, boys are different, and we are going to grow up, and we are going to be distracted and stuff, but does that mean more boys have ADHD now?
So in terms of ADHD, what is it? Are we seeing more ADHD, or are we diagnosing more ADHD, or is it both?
OK. There's ADHD, in my opinion, there's ADHD as a medical condition.
Yes.
And then those are the more severe levels of it, and then there's ADHD as a state of mind. And what I mean by that is, right now, there are times when I'm hyper-focused, and there are times when I'm easily distracted.
Yeah.
Now, for me, it's actually become a superpower for me. I use it to my advantage, and it's great. But it's a state of mind, because right now, if someone came in this room and disrupted this show, we would be hyper-focused on that person who disrupted.
Of course.
Have we got ADHD now?
No.
There you go.
So just in terms of this, let's just go through inattentiveness. This is having a short attention span, making careless mistakes, appearing forgetful. This sounds like me. Being unable to stick to tasks, appearing to be unable to listen to or carry out instructions, constantly changing activity and tasks. Really difficult to define some of those.
But you've just described 90% of the population.
Exactly.
So how is that a problem? I always say to somebody, when they come with a problem, and perhaps you've had this in your experiences, in the medical field, when someone brings a problem to you, how is that a problem?
Well, and I think you make a really good point, which is that parents who are concerned about their children then try and squeeze their kids into some sort of diagnostic label, because then they know where to go with it. What we call labelling and then deviance, because you've got a diagnosis.
Yeah, but I understand why parents do.
So do I.
I understand, because at the end of the day, we don't want to see our kids suffer, but at the same time, unconsciously, we also don't want to be to blame for that. So we don't want to be the parent whose child has got X, Y, Z. So, oh, if my child is a little bit hyperactive, doesn't sit still, doesn't pay attention, rather than label them as perhaps they need to get some help with focusing on stuff, and I'm a bad parent because I don't spend enough time with them, they've got ADHD. Much easier.
And then in terms of hyperactivity, the symptoms are being unable to sit still constantly, fidgeting, unable to concentrate on tasks, excessive talking, most children, and then, and of course, as you say, they're related to various conditions. I am deeply concerned about people making their own diagnoses.
Yes.
But then the flip side of that is it's very difficult. If you go to see a GP and you think, look, my kid has got ADHD, the referral process is very complicated, isn't it? And there is a long waiting time to see a specialist.
Oh, there is, and I understand why people go towards, you know, self-diagnosis and looking at other things and stuff like that. However, it's a vicious cycle, really. If the Department of Health are concerned about the number of applications coming in, the amount of money that we're bleeding, taxpayers' money bleeding through all of this stuff, then we need to do something about it. It's very easy for us to go around telling everybody that I've got ADHD, I took a test online, but I appreciate it's hard to get diagnosed, but again, it's subjective, really. It's like depression. Depression is subjective. You know, if you go to a GP and speak to them about that, how does the GP really know? Do you see what I mean?
And there's another study out. Men with diagnosis of ADHD die 7 years sooner on average than similar people without. For women, the life expectancy gap is almost 9 years. This comes from Professor Jonathan Stott at the University of College London. He looked at 9 million adults across the UK from 2000 to 2019. But when you read the detail, he says it's unlikely that actually the ADHD was a direct cause. So again, this is kind of a very nebulous, tangential report, which doesn't prove cause and effect at all.
Well, my thoughts on it, when I read that, my thoughts on it were, well, is it linked to the fact that because your brain is so active, there are heightened levels of stress within yourself, and stress, as we both know, causes dis-ease in the body? And is it possible that as a result of that, potentially that has caused other issues that has caused you to die earlier? I don't know, but there's no actual diagnosis per se that someone can do with ADHD linked to something. For example, studies have shown that it's perhaps linked to hereditary conditions and stuff, things like that, but no one really knows where it comes from.
So can I just ask you, are you concerned? Because it seems to me that we're over-medicalising everything. We're too quick to prescribe drugs for what is actually a spectrum of normal behaviour. I'll give you a really good example, and I've done quite a lot of work on ADHD. The reaching for methylphenidate, which was the original drug, and then for Elvance, which is a drug broken down, and Vyvanse in the United States. Obviously, the drug companies will make a lot of money on the back of that. For physicians, it's easy because you then the parents want a prescription. But at the end of the day, aren't we actually medicalising what is actually a spectrum of normal behaviour?
This is the concern I had as a mental health nurse. I wasn't the best fan, should I say, of pharmacology. I like to talk to people.
Yes.
Because at the end of the day, it's very easy to put a plaster over a bandage, but if we don't go and look at the root cause of why it's happening, then we're constantly going to be popping pills. So I think you're absolutely right. Instead of the default being drugs, can we look at what's going on there? For example, if your child is not focused on stuff, what are you doing to help them focus? For example, are you reducing screen time? Are you helping them double down on stuff that they're actually enjoying, that good at? And we're not exploring that because it's much easier to get a prescription. So sadly, I think it is going to continue, it is going to be on the rise, and we are normalising these things to the point where we're giving people excuses in their minds as to why they're not where they should be in life at times.
Let me just put this to you. Mary in Kent, good morning to you. Mary's just messaged, Dr. David, my son has autism and ADHD. He was diagnosed 12 years ago, and at the time I'd never heard of autism. I watched a documentary about mental health, and a psychiatrist said that autism would be the new trend in diagnosis. One reason was because of more awareness. I know that some people do want to diagnose because it gives them an excuse for poor parenting. I have family members that have gone to private clinics to get diagnosed, as the NHS has said their child doesn't have autism or ADHD. My son has never received any benefits, as we were never aware when he was first diagnosed he could receive them or possibly receive them. My son is a poor sleeper and he's medicated for this with melatonin. He can't go out by himself. He's in a special needs school. The list is endless. He's a magical young man and I'm so proud of him. But I now find with the overdiagnosis of autism and ADHD, people like my son are being let down by the system. Brilliant message, Mary. Thank you very much.
Completely agree. And isn't that like most situations with healthcare? There are people who genuinely need help, who genuinely need support, and unfortunately there are people who are, you know, flooding the services with these diagnoses, self-diagnosis or whatever, and people like her son are not getting access to the help they need.
And this one, Paul in Grimsby, good morning to you. Did you realise, David, people with kids with ADHD get benefits? They can even get a blue badge. Then you wonder why more kids have ADHD. They were called naughty kids in my day. Let's just move on and broaden this out into, and I think there's a lot of truth in that.
Yeah.
Let's talk about mental health generally of young people. I'm deeply concerned at what we have done to young people, particularly in COVID. We made them cover up. They lost all communication. They were left at home. They were socially isolated. I see loads of kids now who have no interpersonal skills or very few interpersonal skills. They're scared to go out. What have we done to them?
I potentially feel that we've ruined their futures. I think we've ruined the country's future, because there are some great talent. For example, I was asked to go back and mentor at my old school and help people career plan,
Lovely.
which was wonderful.
Yeah.
But David, half of them have got great qualifications, but they have no clue how to communicate. Now, what are they going to do when they're in an interview situation? They're going to struggle, ultimately. And I do believe that more needs to be done to help children or young people to re-establish communication skills, and also re-establish how to actually articulate themselves in any current situation, but also teaching them more about emotional resilience, because I do believe, and I suppose we could save this conversation for another day, but I do believe that people are crumbling under what you and I would deem as okay pressure, because we do need a bit of stress to function in society.
We do.
But for some people, it's just any little thing. It's now, oh my goodness, I'm stressed, I can't cope
But
with
remember, we're mollycoddling these kids as well, because you're not allowed to win at anything.
Yeah.
Everyone has to win.
Oh, everyone's a winner.
Everyone's a winner.
Yeah.
But the culture is very different to how I'm older than you are. But when we grew up, the culture is very different. You know, I wasn't very good at athletics. I don't think that's a major secret. But it's you know, it was a fact of life.
Yeah, but that was okay, because there were things that you were good at. So why can't we accept that people are good at certain things, and that actually being not so good at something is a sign of actually there's room for growth and there's room for improvement, and it's called life. Why does it have to be a problem?
As a father, can I just ask you about your views? I am concerned that parents... And look, I'm not a parent, and I know it's very difficult in terms of time. I don't think we spend enough time sitting down, having a meal, where the devices are switched off, where you're not constantly... I watch my nephews and nieces, like, you know, like they're like that the whole time. That's not good for you. You're hyper-stimulated.
Yes. Yeah, but this is it. So is that ADHD?
No.
Do you see what I mean? So it's just, you start to remove the distraction and remove the stimuli, so to speak, and suddenly they start to normalise again. And I do the same with my kids. We have no screen time. There's no screens at dinner. There's no... If I take my kids to a restaurant, their phones, their devices go away, but you look at half the parents...
Paying for it, yes.
Well, this is it. Half the parents, so they can keep quiet, just give them the screen. Why would you do that? You're just feeding the problem.
Yeah. What's your for parents watching this morning? What's your advice to parents who are concerned about the mental health of their children? What can they do? How do they move that forward?
First of all, look, it's okay to look at the internet to get some inspiration, so to speak, but please don't take it for gospel. I highly recommend people go and seek professional help. But the other thing I'd plead with parents to do is to ask yourself, am I helping or hindering my child by labelling them? Because if there are certain symptoms that, okay, mimic ADHD, they're not very focused, they're not very settled or whatever, is that normal for who they are at that stage of development, or is it a genuine problem? And if you feel it's a genuine problem, then speak to someone rather than making up your own mind, because you could potentially hinder your child's progress if you slap this label on them, because that will take them into adulthood and can cause all kinds of problems.
Brilliant advice. Really good to talk to you. Thank you very much.
Thanks for having me.
That's Jason James, former psychiatric nurse there, talking about ADHD. That was today's Sunday Surgery.
Dr. David Bull's Sunday Surgery.
Keep all your messages coming in, please. Let's just take a voice note. This is Anna from Surrey talking about ADHD. Good morning.
Good morning, doctors. I just thought I'd send you a quick message here. Morning, David. Anna, sorry. David, I see every day a constant stream of rude, dysfunctional adults who want a diagnosis of ADHD or anything that excuses their behaviour off the back of the fact they've got their rude, disruptive children diagnosed with ADHD or somewhere on this vague spectrum. The one thing they all have in common is they want an excuse as to why they cannot or will not cope with normal, everyday society. They are making schools a nightmare. That's why our teachers are leaving. And quite frankly, anyone that has to deal with them really wants to give them an emotional slap and tell them to stop your silly, childish behaviour and operate like an adult. It's not acceptable. Thanks, David. Bye-bye.
Tough talking, Anna. Thank you very much. I agree with that, actually. The over-medicalisation of what is sort of a spectrum of normal behaviour. And Jessen's right, which is we are there. We have to have stress as part of our lives. If we don't function properly. And also, life is not easy. So, therefore, it's really important that children understand coping mechanisms to deal with stress, to deal with the ups and downs of life. And not everyone can be a winner. That's not how life works. Keep all your messages coming in about ADHD or about Rachel Reeves. Should we move closer to Europe, away from Donald Trump? Is that the right thing to do? Has Brexit been a complete failure? The number 0344 499 1000. Time for a break. Still to come, we'll be talking about all things tech with Davis Fang, who joins us from somewhere terribly glamorous, somewhere in the world. This is Weekend Breakfast.
As they rioted, they said this was a terrorist attack. Keir Starmer, our Prime Minister, went onto the television and said, absolutely outrageous, it wasn't terrorism, and you are all far-right thugs. Yeah. And these far-right thugs are spreading misinformation. No, it was Keir Starmer, it was the police, it was the Crown Prosecution Service, it was the local authorities. They were spreading misinformation. They lied to us. Yeah. They said there was no terrorist connection.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Welcome back, 9:32, Sunday, January 26th. An incredible response to that item we just did on ADHD with Jessen there. David, Jessen was spot on. Kids don't go out and they don't get physically tired anymore. Correct. No wonder they can't sit still. That's Louise. Good morning. You are right, Louise. Good morning, David. I think this ADHD stuff is a cop-out. Let's all diagnose ourselves with a condition that cripples our mental life and our belief in our own prospects in life. We're then rushing to get pills and we are being let down. Claire, thank you for that. This is Anthony in Hove. Good morning. Good morning, David. It was lovely to listen to Jessen James, an expert who we should hear more from. What are your thoughts on ADHD, please? Is it overdiagnosed? Were we being unfair? Let me know your thoughts on that. Steve, good morning to you. The point missed with the fashion trend of ADHD is that it's now so easy for certain demographics of parents to use it as a source of income from benefits. As I said, just that huge amount of money that you can claim from the government. Even the government's worried about how much money they are being given away. This one says from Maureen, good morning to you. My adult daughter was diagnosed with ADHD last year. The family always thought something wasn't quite right with her, and she has since said that she has suffered silently for years. She now takes medication and is so much more focused, less anxious and happy. Great, good. I have to say, I have treated people with ADHD, and for those people who truly do have it, the medication is life-changing. It really does help you to concentrate. And when that drug, Elvance, came on, and the problem with a lot of those ADHD medications is they're subject to abuse, so that you can take those drugs and they're taken as an abuse drug. And the brilliant thing about things like Elvance and Vyvanse is they're prodrugs, so that you can't actually abuse them. Anyway, so you can see enormous changes in those people who really do have ADHD. Lots of others coming in. This is Michelle in Bristol. Good morning to you. Great show, David. Thank you. I'm astonished that people can self-diagnose anything and then get benefits. So am I. I'm on disability benefits, as I've said before, but each time my claim is reviewed, I have to provide so much evidence from consultants, GPs, nurse specialists. I receive not much more than £12,000. I can't work. I have physical and mental health issues. I fear future restrictions and reviews will apply to me because of the increase in claims that have happened in the past few years. That's Michelle in Bristol. Thank you for that as well. Keep all of those messages coming in. We've really touched a nerve here with regards to ADHD. David, this is Mark in Selby. Your shirt reminds me of a box of crayons. Thank you. Rachel Reeves is desperately trying to put out fires, which she started. Oh, this is good. Just to correct you, David, my guy lives in Oz and drop bears are a myth for all the green palms. No, really? I thought that was true. My understanding was that a drop bear was a koala that ate too much eucalyptus leaves and then it was soporific and they fell out of a tree. I'll tell you what, I'll tell you someone who will know, or he might not know actually. Davis Fang will know, because it is time for Tech Rundown.
Tech Rundown.
Davis Fang, good morning.
Hi David, how are you today?
Yeah, good. Happy Australia Day.
Thank you, and it's a bit weird because I'm not in Australia, as you might know, from my very rudimentary setup. I'm currently in Japan, which is, I don't believe that they celebrate Australia Day here for some reason.
No,
very odd indeed.
Now, do you know anything about drop bears in Australia? Do koalas drop out of trees?
Well, I do have to say that, one second, that
you've gone all
koala
blurry.
bears, drop bears, let me try to fix my camera.
Yes, please.
So drop bears are basically like koala bears if we want to try to scare a weird foreigner person. Like if they... I'm afraid that it's a bit of a myth. If we want to scare you, then I'm afraid that drop bears is what we like to present to the world.
Oh, I like the fable anyway, the idea that koalas are having a lovely time and falling out of trees. Anyway, I don't know what you're doing. For someone who's meant to be a tech savvy and you can't even work the camera.
Yes, my phone has disconnected from... There we go.
OK, are you back now? Right, there's tons to talk about. Donald Trump has hit the ground running very much in the United States. We spoke about this, and there's been this case, hasn't there, about TikTok, which is down with all the kids. And there have been real concerns about ByteDance, the parent company, the links to Chinese authoritarian regime. It was ruled that ByteDance had to divest of TikTok, and then Donald Trump comes along with a rather novel idea.
Yeah, so this idea, I think, is rather insane. And I'm not sure if the US populace themselves would actually be impressed with it. Because what Trump is proposing is that the US government should own 50% of TikTok. So just for background, if you've somehow not been listening to the news over the past month, so TikTok briefly shut down across the US for around 12 hours. But President-elect Donald Trump at the time proposed a plan for the US to own to sort of bring it back via a divestment plan. So the idea was that a US-based company should purchase TikTok. And this is quite important because 170 million Americans do use TikTok on a daily basis. And it employs a lot of US businesses as well. A lot of US, provides a lot of jobs. And Trump suggested a joint venture where the US would own half of TikTok and the government would provide approval, but not financial investment, which would preserve the platform's value. For if TikTok were to just be banned in the US entirely, the value of the company would be significantly decreased. Trump also stated to Congress that, sorry, my camera's having a
I can see that. Carry on.
Essentially, through Trump's executive order, he's trying to bring TikTok back. Sorry, let me just bring this back. And
this is what happens to me. What you need, Davis, is a technical reboot, which is a turning it on and off again.
I do.
Yeah.
Yeah, there we go.
Right.
So there's been a lot of plans essentially to try to save TikTok, but I'm not sure if this 50% if a possible buyer were to purchase TikTok, giving 50% of that to the US government is something that
come on,
is actually going to go ahead.
You've got to admire him. It's a deal. He says, look, I want a JV, I want a joint venture, so TikTok is worth nothing because if we're not going to license it, it's nothing without an approval. So basically, you give me 50% of it, suddenly you've got a company worth something. I mean, you've got to admire it.
Yes, however, just earlier today, Trump has suggested that there is an alternative plan. For if we remember back to 2020, where TikTok was going to be banned the first time round, Oracle sort of saved the day by allowing all of the data to be hosted in an American company. And there's this new plan that's forming where Oracle and outside investors as well will take control of TikTok's operations. And through this, ByteDance will be reduced to having just a minority share in the company.
Right.
And Oracle will essentially continue to host all of the... sorry, let me just change my camera settings.
Don't worry.
I'm just going to revert to my laptop's camera, which is the worst camera in the world. But the idea is that... Oracle and other stakeholders, including Microsoft, might purchase TikTok.
Right.
And ByteDance, which is the Chinese company, would be reduced to just having a minority share. So there are multiple plans happening. And there's also another alternative plan, which is suggesting that TikTok might not actually need to divest, to sell their company or part of the company to a US administration, to a US company. And we're suggesting there's someone on ByteDance's board called William Ford. He's suggesting that there might be a plan that would sort of have a change of control of some kind to comply with US legislation, whether that is just hosting the algorithm within the US or whether that is something else that's still to be discovered.
I mean, you have to admire Trump just for his bravado there. I'll tell you what, Davis, we'll take a break. You catch your breath, turn the thing off, get your screwdriver out. We'll rejoin you after this break. This is Weekend Breakfast. Good morning.
Across the UK. On DAB+. On YouTube. On the app. On your mobile. The home of common sense. This is Talk.
Welcome back, 9:43, Sunday, January the 26th. I'm in the middle of a conversation with Davis Fang, who can't work his telephone. Good morning, Davis, to you.
Hello, I've reverted back to my laptop's
much
camera,
better,
so
much
I hope,
better.
fingers crossed, that
I'm
should
really
just
pleased.
work.
Well, I'm really pleased it happens to you as well, because it's normally me. Let's talk about the UK watchdog now targeting Apple, Google mobile ecosystem. So, do you want to explain this? This is the Competition and Markets Authority has launched separate investigations to look at these ecosystems, i.e. Apple and Google. I assume this is to do with their app stores, is it?
Yeah, so no matter what you buy, whether it's an iPhone or an Android phone, you are basically encouraged to use their respective app stores. So if you've got a Google phone, it's the Google Play Store. If it's an iPhone, it's the Apple App Store. And, you use these certain marketplaces to download new apps. And although it is possible to sort of sideload or download another app store, especially on a Google phone, it's quite difficult to do so for the average consumer. And this is what the UK Competition and Markets Authority, or CMA, has opened an investigation into. And the aim of this is to sort of assess if these companies hold a strategic market status that requires regulatory intervention. And the idea is, really, is whether or not this sort of is monopolistic behavior to sort of host and encourage the use of your own app store on your own phone's platform. It feels a little bit weird for me, but it's not really unprecedented, because the EU has been doing a very similar thing. And they've actually forced Apple, continue.
Carry on.
They've sort of forced Apple to actually allow the side loading of separate app stores, which is sort of against Apple's entire mantra. So I do think it's a little bit odd that the UK is looking into this when the EU has already sort of gone down this route, and also the fact that it's probably not entirely desirable, in my view at least.
I think I think for most consumers that don't really care as long as it works. But in terms of the one thing where I do agree with this is in terms of browsers. There are certain browsers that collect a lot more data than others, aren't there? So I'm minded there are certain ones that are advertising on television now that don't collect that personal data. And I suppose the CMA is just trying to hold those mobile providers to account. The idea, Apple, is to have its own ecosystem that you never leave.
Yeah, especially with the browser issue, because pre-installed on phones is, the default browser. On Google's phones, you've got the Chrome browser. On Apple's phones, you've got Safari. And although some of them do collect more data than others, I don't believe that it's that difficult to download an alternative browser. So I'm a little bit confused as to why they've put so much emphasis on default browsers. Maybe it's, it's the example that most people can relate to. And also, just like the fact that the EU has already gone down this route just makes this effort by the UK watchdog just a little bit futile, and I believe a little bit of a waste of taxpayers' money, because what point is there? If the EU's already done it, what can the UK do to really change the
Come on,
these
this is a
companies?
Brexit dividend, Davis. Let's talk about, so Elon Musk was in the news. Obviously, he did this thumping of his chest and then raised his hand, which many people have likened to a Nazi salute. Now, I don't understand this at all, this article. I read it and read it again. Major subreddits are banning links to X following Musk's likes. What is a subreddit?
Yeah, so I think there's a lot of background we need to cover about this. So, we know that Elon Musk performed a relatively sort of controversial gesture that sort of resembled a Nazi salute, if you ask some people. It drew some criticism, or rather a lot, from a lot of online communities. And Reddit is a platform, they call it the front page of the internet. It's sort of a place where lots of communities come together in sort of community, sort of like boards called subreddits, and a lot of them are quite left-leaning, and because of that they've blocked links to X or Twitter, which is Elon Musk's platform. And I think that it's not exactly going to be the most fruitful of decisions. Like some of the communities that have blocked links to X include Formula One, 2 X chromosomes, which has over 40 million members as well, Liverpool IFC, and also some gaming communities like Nintendo, stuff like that, you know, traditionally sort of left-leaning communities. And just the fact that they've blocked links to X, the idea is that it will reduce traffic to X. However, I don't believe that this is going to result in a very large sort of decrease in traffic. And also, these subreddits have also sort of like held similar protests in the past, most namely in 2023 when Reddit decided to change their APIs for you know, a variety of reasons, and after a few weeks nobody really cared. So I don't ultimately believe that this is going to change anything, unfortunately.
And just very quickly, I've got 10 seconds. Do you know who the US president is?
Is it Joe Biden by any chance?
Go on, tell us why.
Well, it would be if you ask Meta's AI. So we know that all of these tech companies are, you know, lobbying for the support of the new president, and it's quite embarrassing that Meta's AI, when you asked it a few days after the inauguration, it said Joe Biden, and that's quite embarrassing because, you know, AI, as we know, it struggles to deliver up-to-date information because most of its knowledge is based on articles from long ago.
Davis, always good to talk to you. Enjoy your trip there in Japan.
Thank you
very much indeed for joining us. That was today's Tech Rundown. By the way, AI is very good for jingles, isn't it, Dave? Yes, very good, very good. Right, we'll take a break. See you after the break. This is Weekend Breakfast.
As they rioted, they said this was a terrorist attack. Keir Starmer, our Prime Minister, went onto the television and said, absolutely outrageous, it wasn't terrorism, and you are all far-right thugs. Yeah. And these far-right thugs are spreading misinformation. No, it was Keir Starmer, it was the police, it was the Crown Prosecution Service, it was the local authorities. They were spreading misinformation. They lied to us. Yeah. They said there was no terrorist connection.
across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Welcome back, 9:53 Weekend Breakfast. Good morning, Richard Patient. Very nice that you're watching this morning. Actually, you are my oldest school friend. 50 years I've known you. Long-suffering. Right, Steve, I'll see you later. Steve is on the line from Leeds. Good morning to you, Steve.
Good morning, David. How are you?
Yeah, I'm all right, thank you very much indeed. What's on your mind?
It's just this quick thing about this poll that Rachel Reeve claims, 15,000 people, blah, blah, blah. The majority want to remain. I would go back to what you said yesterday.
Go on.
The real poll is that Reform have grown from 14 to 26%. That's a 12% increase. Conservatives are roughly where they were. Labour's dropped by 7% to 18%, and Liberals have dropped by 2%. Well, the two parties that reflect the view of the British people regards Europe, Reform and Conservatives, are 48% of that poll.
Yeah,
that's the real poll on Europe. Yeah, and what it reflects, the growth in Reform and the diminishment of the other parties, it reflects everybody's attitude that we are fed up of being treated like second-class citizens, and our own government not wanting to support this country and this nation and what the possibilities are for us in the future, by constantly wanting us to tie ourselves to other people's organisations, whether it's the ECHR or Europe, but to tell us what to do. That's your biggest poll, and I'll tell you this, in 6 months' time, that poll will be over 30%. And Rachel Reid needs to look at that as a reflection of people's view on Europe, not some 15,000 people who asked a funny question, do you think Brexit's worked? We know Brexit would have worked if it wasn't for the blob and all the politicians that have tried their hardest to rule us rather than be ruled by us. And that's the problem.
Steve, brilliant call. Thanks ever so much. Tarquin is in London. Good morning.
Dr. Bird, well, I couldn't really put it better myself. The last gentleman was absolutely brilliant, spot on, couldn't agree more. I suppose all I could really add to what is total common sense is that this has all been engineered by Rachel from accounts under her self-metamorphosizing CV on LinkedIn. Why should we ever believe a goddamn word that stupid woman ever says?
Don't mince your words, will you, Tarquin? Really good to talk to you. No. Very interesting, though, isn't it? They just don't want to hear it. Thank you ever so much, Tarquin, for your message. Let me just remind you, we've got some great guests coming up here on tour. James Murray, MP, Exchequer Secretary to the Treasury, will be here with someone, what's his name? James Max, apparently. 10:40. That's at 10:40. Then Nigel Farage, of course, the leader of Reform UK, will be joining James Max, or whoever he is, in the studio at around 11:30. So that's James Murray at 10:40, Nigel Farage at 11:30. Talking of which, the devil is in the detail. James Max, good morning.
Oh, good morning.
How are you?
Yes, I'm very pleased to see the shirt that you referred to as a deck chair in person.
Yes, it's good,
I
isn't
was
it?
listening.
Yeah, well,
I was listening.
Does it look like a deck chair? Or a box of crayons?
It looks like sort of crumpled pyjamas now.
Well, I've been sitting here for 4 hours. It's a long time. It's been a long time.
It's about time we moved you on.
Well, I think it is indeed. You know, my legs have gone to sleep. Have you got a busy show?
I think we do. You've already mentioned.
You do.
I think we do. You've already mentioned that we're going to be joined live in the studio by Nigel Farage. He's going to
Good
be.
booking.
Thanks. We're going to be. He's my local MP, of course.
Is he?
Yes, down in Clacton. Yeah, Frinton-on-Sea.
I forgot Frinton falls into Clacton.
Yes, it certainly does. So we've got plenty of questions to ask him, and I'm sure we'll be opening the phone lines. We'll be turning our attention to all the big stories of the day. We'll be speaking to Treasury Minister James Murray. We're going to be talking to him about Rachel Reeves and how well she's doing.
Yeah, don't you dare block what I'm going to do, my planning and infrastructure. Don't you dare, says Rachel Reeves.
Yeah, well, look, sometimes I think infrastructure does get blocked. It's the collateral damage that you cause around, and maybe that's a distraction.
Did you see the snail story? They've been doing this investigation into snails. It was meant to last 3 years. It's lasted 10 years.
Oh, what? I mean, along with the bat story. You couldn't make it up.
No, you couldn't.
We're also going to be answering the big questions, the things that we all want answers to. For example, what's more healthy, a fry-up or granola, fruit yoghurt and juice?
I'm going to go with fry-up.
You might be right, but we'll be finding out.
I'll tell you why. It's about sugar.
And probably processed food.
And processed food, yeah.
Yeah, so we'll be doing that, and also I'm going to be asking a sort of big question, which kind of encompasses everything, but looking at the front pages today, looking at the big news stories, looking at what we've been discussing and polls and everything else, I want to find out from you, who's listening and watching, who or what has damaged the UK?
Oh, good question. Here's another good question. What do you hate most about modern driving? Is it people who sit in the middle lane and don't pull across? Is it cyclists in tight lycra? Is it tailgating?